Imagine right now that you are an MIT-trained engineer.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, so you've spent your entire adult life just writing code.
Right.
You solve these incredibly complex algorithms, you live in this highly predictable world of mathematics, and, you've never sold a single thing in your life. Not a cup of lemonade, let alone some massive six-figure software contract.
Not exactly your classic slick sales guy.
Exactly. And suddenly, you are put in charge of building a multi-million-dollar sales team
Yeah.
from absolute scratch for a tiny, practically unknown startup.
I mean, for most people, that's pure panic mode right there.
Oh, absolutely. If you're like most people, you assume you need to just, go out and find those charismatic, fast-talking salespeople to come in and save the day.
The rainmakers.
Right, the rainmakers. But the guy we're diving into today, he didn't do that at all. He basically just viewed salespeople as, well, lines of code.
Which sounds crazy.
It does. But spoiler alert, he ended up engineering this massive $100 million revenue machine.
It is honestly, arguably one of the most fascinating pivots in modern business history.
Yeah.
Because you take this ultimate fish out of water scenario, right?
Mhm.
But instead of the fish just, gasping for air on the dock, it completely redesigns the ocean to suit its own biological needs.
That is exactly what we are exploring today on this deep dive. Because if you are listening to this and you've ever felt that sales is this unpredictable, kind of mystical art form.
Right, something reserved only for the naturally extroverted folk.
Exactly, or the fiercely aggressive ones. Well, this deep dive is going to fundamentally rewire how you think about revenue growth.
We are looking at how to transition sales from a chaotic, emotion-driven art, basically, into a highly predictable, mathematically sound science.
And it all starts with the absolute bedrock foundation, which is hiring.
Always comes back to hiring.
It does. We are going to explore why getting those initial hires right is the ultimate survival mechanism for any business, and why the so-called perfect elite salesperson from one company could actually completely bankrupt yours.
It completely upends the traditional playbook. I mean, for decades, the whole business world has just operated on this assumption that talent is universally transferable.
Like a closer is a closer, right?
Exactly. The belief was always a closer is a closer, regardless of the product. And today, we're going to dismantle that assumption entirely.
So let's set the stage a bit, because context here is just everything.
Go for it.
It's 2007. We are in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's late on a Thursday night. And Mark Roberge has just signed on to be the fourth employee at a tiny startup called HubSpot.
Just 4 people. Wow.
Right. And he is the first sales hire. But, like we established, his background is strictly MIT engineering.
No sales experience whatsoever.
None. So he's sitting alone in this empty office, staring at a blank notepad, just trying to figure out how to climb this seemingly impossible mountain.
I could just picture the blank page anxiety.
Oh, for sure. And he writes down 4 words on that pad. Scalable, predictable revenue growth.
And those 4 words, I mean, they are so incredibly potent.
Why is that?
Because they represent the exact opposite of how, 99% of companies historically manage their sales.
Right. It was all gut feeling before.
Totally. If you walk into a traditional sales bullpen in the late 90s or early 2000s, the words scalable and predictable are just nowhere to be found.
What do you see instead?
You see a roller coaster. You see a culture entirely dependent on heroics. You've got a couple of rainmakers pulling in massive deals through just sheer force of will.
Relying on gut instincts, taking clients to steak dinners.
Exactly. Personal relationships. All while the bottom half of the team completely misses their quota.
Right. It's entirely reliant on individual magic. If the rainmaker has a bad month, the whole company has a bad month.
Precisely. And an engineer looks at that scenario and just sees a profoundly broken system.
An engineer hates that kind of variance.
They cannot tolerate it. A system where the output is determined by magic or someone's mood. Unacceptable.
So by writing down scalable and predictable, he's making a statement.
Yeah. Roberge is declaring that he is going to frame this deeply human challenge through an industrial systematic lens. He isn't looking for better magicians,
He's looking for a formula.
Exactly. A reliable machine.
And he actually outlines the blueprint for that formula right there on the notepad.
Just breaks it all down.
Yeah, he breaks this massive, kind of abstract idea of growing revenue into 4 distinct pillars that he needs to engineer.
Let's actually trace his logic here.
Yeah.
Because one leads directly into the next.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
So he starts by looking at the very end of the line, right? The buyer.
The input.
Right, because he realizes that to get predictable revenue, you can't just have salespeople cold calling out of the yellow pages.
Because that is inherently unpredictable.
Exactly. One day you call a guy who is in a great mood. The next day you call someone who just screams at you and hangs up. The input is totally chaotic.
And that is the core issue with legacy outbound sales. You're constantly interrupting people.
Yeah, it's disruptive.
And the conversion rates are completely erratic because you have no idea if the person picking up the phone actually has a problem that you can solve.
So to engineer predictability, you have to stabilize that input.
Which leads to his realization regarding demand generation.
Right, the demand generation formula.
The mandate becomes provide the exact same quality and quantity of leads every single month.
Which, back in 2007 was a pretty radical concept.
It is unheard of.
But let's look at the mechanism of how you actually do that. Because you can't just mandate better leads from the sky.
Right, you can't just command it to happen.
You have to build an engine. And this is where inbound marketing comes into play, right?
Yes, exactly.
Instead of hunting with a spear, you are setting highly targeted traps, content, blogs, SEO, stuff like that.
So the people who are actively experiencing the pain your software solves are actually coming to you.
Which changes everything.
It fundamentally changes the mathematical probability of that interaction.
How so? Give me the math.
Well, when a prospect finds your article about a specific business problem, they read it, and then they willingly fill out a form requesting to be contacted.
They're raising your hand.
Right. The lead is now qualified, educated, and demonstrating real intent.
They actually want to talk to you.
Exactly. If you can use content and SEO to ensure that you generate, say, 1,000 of those specific inbound leads a month, you have solved the first major variable in the revenue equation.
You've stabilized the fuel for the machine.
Stabilize the input, yes.
Okay, so the machine now has a steady flow of high-quality fuel. But the fuel still has to be processed.
And this is where the human element comes back in.
Which is always the messiest part.
Oh, without a doubt.
You have a great lead, and you hand it to a salesperson. But if that salesperson is just kind of improvising on the phone...
Then your highly predictable leads are suddenly being processed unpredictably.
Right. So his next logical leap is the sales management formula.
You have to hold the salespeople accountable to the exact same sales process.
Which I imagine is much harder than it sounds. Salespeople are notoriously independent.
Oh, they hate being told exactly what to say.
I bet.
But from an engineering perspective, if you don't standardize the process, you literally cannot diagnose failure.
Make that real for me.
Okay, say Representative A and Representative B are both given identical inbound leads.
Okay, same exact fuel.
Right. But Representative A closes 20% of them, and Representative B closes 2%.
That's a huge gap.
You need to know why that gap exists. If they are both using completely different pitches, different follow-up cadences, different pricing structures.
It's impossible to isolate the variable that is causing the failure?
Exactly. It's like doing a science experiment without a control group.
You have no idea what is actually causing the reaction.
You're just guessing. So you enforce a rigid pipeline.
First call is always discovery.
Second call is always a tailored demo.
Third call is pricing.
Boom. But to get a team to actually execute that uniform process, you can't just hand them a manual on their first day and cross your fingers.
Right. You actually have to teach them how to do it. Which brings us to the third pillar, the sales training formula.
Train every salesperson in the exact same way.
This seems obvious, but the historical reality of sales training is, well, it's terrifyingly casual, isn't it?
Terrifying is the right word. In most mid-sized companies, training essentially consists of having the new hire pull up a chair next to the top performer for 2 weeks.
Just shadow Dave for a bit.
Exactly. And hoping they absorb the magic through osmosis.
Just watch what Dave does. Dave's a killer. Be like Dave.
Yeah, and the problem is Dave might be succeeding because he has a naturally booming, authoritative voice, or maybe because he happens to play golf with 3 major regional buyers.
And the new hire cannot replicate Dave's voice or his golf handicap.
No, that kind of training is completely unscalable.
So how does an engineer fix that?
An engineer approaches training like writing an algorithm. There must be a standardized curriculum.
Day 1, industry context.
Day 2, product architecture.
Day 3, objection handling scripts.
Exactly. You put every human being through the identical assembly line so that when they finally hit the sales floor, they are a known quantity.
But here is the catch, and I think this is what drives us to the absolute core of this entire deep dive today.
The foundational piece.
Right. Because you can have the perfect leads, you can have the perfect management metrics, and the most rigorous training assembly line in the world.
But if you put the wrong raw material onto that assembly line,
The final product is still going to be totally defective.
always.
Yeah.
Which leaves us with the ultimate foundational pillar, the sales hiring formula.
Finding a way to hire the exact same profile of successful salesperson every single time.
It is the single most critical variable in the whole system.
And Roberge recognized early on that his complete lack of sales experience was actually like his secret weapon here, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He wasn't blinded by all the industry superstitions.
There is this well-documented tension in the corporate world between engineering and sales.
Oh, yeah. They often do not understand each other at all.
Engineers often view sales as this irrational, somewhat manipulative, dark art of persuasion.
And conversely, salespeople often view engineers as rigid, unimaginative robots who just don't understand human nuance.
Right. But by entering the sales arena purely as an engineer, he bypassed all that emotional baggage.
He didn't care about the stereotypes.
He just looked at the problem and said, okay, I need to bring numeracy and logic to a field that has been running on charisma and gut feeling for a century.
Which is an incredibly empowering realization for anyone trying to build a business right now.
Why is that empowering?
Because it means you don't have to be born with some innate mystical ability to spot talent.
You don't need a sixth sense.
No. You can mathematically and systematically engineer your hiring process.
But okay, let's get into the reality of actually executing this. Because the source material points out a massive paradox in how leaders actually behave in the real world.
Yes, the prioritization paradox.
Right. Because painting this picture right now, it makes it sound so clean and linear.
It sounds great on a podcast. I mean, on a deep dive.
Exactly. But if you have ever been inside a scaling startup, you know it is absolute chaos.
Fires everywhere.
Your to-do list is a mile long. You are trying to build the training program. You're trying to write the management playbooks. You are probably trying to help close the few enterprise deals you have just to keep the lights on.
Dealing with HR issues, product bugs, investor updates.
You have dozens of blazing fires all around you, and you only have so many hours in the week.
You have to choose which fire to put out first.
And Roberge made the calculated decision to let some of those other fires burn so he could focus entirely on world-class hiring.
And strategically, I have to say, that is the only mathematical choice that guarantees long-term survival.
Really? Explain that.
Think about the compounding nature of talent.
Okay.
If you pour all of your resources into building an incredible training program, right, and a state-of-the-art forecasting model.
The best infrastructure money can buy.
Yeah. But you hire mediocre, unmotivated individuals. Your spectacular infrastructure will not save them.
They'll just be mediocre within a great system.
Exactly. You simply cannot out-train a fundamentally bad hire. It is a mathematical impossibility.
Let me pause you there, though, and actually challenge this a bit.
Sure.
Because I want to look at this from the perspective of a founder who is listening to this and is in the trenches right now.
Okay, put yourself in their shoes.
This emphasis on hiring sounds great in an academic setting, but let's say I'm a startup founder. I have 2 months of runway left in the bank.
It's stressful.
Making payroll next month is a very real looming threat. And I have a massive deal on the 1 yard line that will keep the lights on for another entire year.
The savior deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you telling me I should deprioritize closing that deal? Like putting the actual cash in the bank so I can spend my afternoon meticulously screening resumes for a candidate who won't even be fully ramped up and closing their own deals for another 4 or 5 months?
I hear you.
It sounds like a luxury I just can't afford. Honestly, it sounds like advice that kills real companies.
And that is the exact psychological trap that kills scaling companies.
Really? You think so?
I do. You are absolutely right that the pressure is immense, and the instinct is to jump into the trench and close the deal yourself.
Because you have to survive.
True. We have to separate survival mode from scaling mode.
Okay, that's a fair distinction.
If you are literally 2 weeks from bankruptcy, yes, go close a deal, obviously. But if you are trying to build a scalable revenue machine, continuously prioritizing the immediate deal over the systemic hiring process is a fatal error in leadership.
Unpack the math on that for me. Why is it fatal?
Because of the hidden compounding cost of a bad hire.
The hidden cost.
Yeah. Let's walk through it. Let's say you wing the interview process because you were too busy closing deals.
You just go with your gut on a candidate to get a body in the seat.
Exactly. You hire someone based on a gut feeling. They start. For the first 3 months, they are consuming a salary while producing zero revenue as they ramp up.
Which is standard.
Right. Moreover, they're consuming the precious limited time of your top performers who are trying to help them learn the ropes.
So now your best people are slowing down.
Yes. Then, in months 4 and 5, they start burning through your highly valuable, expensive inbound leads.
Oh, right. Because they aren't fully competent yet.
They're ruining potential customer relationships. And then by month 6, you finally realize they are failing, and you have to fire them.
Which means you are right back to zero.
Worse than zero. You are totally negative.
How so?
You have lost 6 months of salary. You've lost the marketing cost of the leads they burned. You've lost the time your managers wasted. And you have the massive opportunity cost of the revenue they didn't close.
Oh, wow. So you haven't just lost time, you've bled resources.
You have lost 9 to 12 months of momentum.
That is devastating for a startup.
On the flip side, what happens if you have a team of hyper-competent elite performers?
Even if the system is broken.
Exactly. They will figure out a way to win. Even if your training manuals are outdated, even if your CRM is a total mess. A truly elite salesperson will find the pain point, navigate the organization, and close the deal.
So great talent can overcome broken processes.
Exactly. But a perfect process cannot overcome poor talent.
Okay, when you frame it around the devastating cost of a bad hire burning through expensive leads, the priority makes complete sense.
It's the only logical focus.
Winning the daily battle of a single deal just doesn't matter if you are losing the war of team competency.
Spot on.
So let's say I am fully bought in. I am prioritizing hiring above all else. I'm going to apply logic. I need elite salespeople.
Right.
It seems like the most logical thing to do would be to look at the market, find the companies that are already crushing it, like, Oracle or Salesforce or IBM,
The big players.
and simply poach their absolute best performers, the top-tier reps who have proven over a decade that they can hit 150% of their quota every single year. You just buy the best raw material available.
It sounds totally foolproof, doesn't
I
it?
mean, yeah.
Well, wouldn't that work?
You go out, you wine and dine the proven winners, you pay them a premium, and you bring them into your startup. But this is where Roberge experienced the aha moment that defines this entire methodology.
What happened?
He did exactly that. He aggressively recruited these hyper-successful veteran salespeople, and when they got to HubSpot, many of them failed completely.
Wait, really? That feels so counterintuitive.
Wow.
If you are a truly elite closer, shouldn't you be able to sell ice to an Eskimo? Isn't sales just, persuasion?
And that right there is the great myth of the universal top performer.
The myth.
The reality is that there is no such thing as a universally perfect salesperson. The ideal hiring profile is fundamentally different for every single company because context is everything.
Context. Okay, break that down for me.
Sales is not just a monolithic skill called persuasion. It's a complex matrix of very specific attributes.
Like what? Well, some salespeople are hyper-analytical, right?
Yeah.
They love diving into supply chain logistics and proving ROI on a massive spreadsheet.
Okay.
Some are incredibly high activity. They can pick up the phone 80 times a day, face brutal rejection, and just not lose an ounce of enthusiasm.
The relentless hustlers.
Exactly. And then some are masterful relationship builders who take 2 years to close a multi-million-dollar government contract over golf and steak dinners.
So it's a completely different terrain for each of them.
Completely good.
It's almost like taking an Olympic figure skater, someone who has unparalleled balance, core strength, and discipline, and just dropping them into the middle of a world-class surfing competition.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Like, yes, they are an undeniably elite athlete, but their specific superpower, manipulating a thin blade on a frozen, predictable surface, is entirely useless in a fluid, chaotic ocean environment.
They're going to drown.
Exactly. Not because they're a bad athlete, but because their context completely changed.
That is a phenomenal analogy. When a salesperson's specific cognitive map and behavioral strengths align with the company's specific market environment, what we call the buyer context, it is a beautiful thing.
But when there is a mismatch,
It is an uphill battle that usually ends in termination, regardless of their past track record.
let's make this tangible for the listener. Let's look at the specific historical context of HubSpot in 2007.
Okay.
Why did the high-activity transactional reps from established companies fail so spectacularly? The source text highlights a hypothetical interaction with a rep named Sam, salesperson.
Let's deconstruct that scenario to see exactly where the failure occurs.
Let's do it. So Sam comes from an established software company.
Yeah. In his previous job, His company was a household name. He was selling ERP systems or like accounting software.
Something everyone already knows they need.
Exactly. His market was mature. The buyers already knew they needed accounting software. The only question was whose software to buy and at what price.
So Sam's superpower was high activity and aggressive pipeline management.
He could manage 100 deals at once and just push them across the finish line.
Right. The buyer context there is essentially a replacement sale. The buyer has a budget, they have a timeline, they just need to negotiate.
Highly transactional.
So Sam comes to HubSpot, a tiny startup selling something called inbound marketing software in 2007, which is a time when most businesses barely even understood how Google worked.
It was a different era.
And Sam picks up the phone and calls prospect Pete.
And the friction is just immediate.
Walk me through it.
Sam operates from his standard playbook. He says, "Hi, Pete. I saw you requested information on our site. What questions do you have?"
Which worked perfectly at his old job.
Because in Sam's old world, the prospect would immediately ask about features or pricing. But Pete says, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
What is HubSpot?
Already, Sam's cognitive map is failing.
He is completely lost.
He is expecting a buyer who is ready to evaluate, but he has a buyer who basically has amnesia.
So Sam pivots to his elevator pitch. We are an inbound marketing software company.
And Pete asks the question that just kills the transactional rep. What is inbound marketing?
This right here is the critical moment of failure.
Why?
Because in his previous role, Sam never had to explain why accounting was important. He just had to prove his software did it faster.
Here, Sam is hitting a massive wall of market ignorance.
Pete doesn't know the category exists, let alone why he actually needs it.
So what does Sam do?
Sam tries to push through with features. It allows you to turn website visitors into leads. And Pete just responds with, how does that work?
It completely exposes the reality of the situation. HubSpot in 2007 wasn't a replacement sale, it was an evangelistic sale.
Exactly.
They were selling a paradigm shift. You literally had to teach the prospect a new way of thinking about business before you could even begin to show them the software.
Precisely. And a high-activity, aggressive closer is fundamentally unequipped for an evangelistic sale.
Because it requires a different skill set entirely.
An evangelistic sale requires deep patience. It requires the ability to ask profound diagnostic questions about a company's pain points.
You have to act as a teacher.
A teacher, a consultant, and a trusted advisor. If your superpower is just dialing the phone 100 times a day and pushing for a signature, you are going to totally alienate a buyer who is confused and needs education.
The figure skater is in the ocean.
A figure skater is definitely drowning.
So the immense practical takeaway here for anyone listening is that you can never, ever blindly copy and paste another company's hiring profile.
Never.
You cannot look at a resume, see that they hit quota at Microsoft, and just assume they will hit quota at your startup.
It's a recipe for disaster. You have to ruthlessly analyze your specific buyer.
What does the buyer know? What do they not know?
What kind of emotional and intellectual guidance do they need to make a purchase?
And then you hire for the specific psychological traits that match that exact journey.
And this leads us to the regression analysis, which is where the engineering mindset truly changed the game.
Because he didn't just guess what these traits were.
No, Roberge quantified them.
This is the part that I find absolutely fascinating. Because it touches on something we all kind of instinctively feel, but he actually proved it with math.
He took all these subjective, squishy human traits, assigned them numerical values, and mapped them against actual revenue generation over time.
And he ran a statistical regression analysis.
And the data revealed something that completely contradicted 100 years of sales stereotypes.
What did it show?
It proved that the most successful salespeople weren't the aggressive, pushy closers.
The sharks.
Right, not the sharks. The data proved that salespeople who scored high in being intelligent and helpful massively outperformed the traditional sharks.
It is a beautiful vindication of the modern buyer.
It really is.
But to understand why the data showed this, we have to look at the massive structural macroeconomic shift that occurred.
Right. Why did the aggressive closer work in the 1980s and 1990s but completely fail in the 2000s?
It all comes down to the internet, right? The democratization of information.
Exactly. We all know the sell me this pen, Wolf of Wall Street era is dead. Nobody likes a bully.
But what's fascinating is that the regression analysis actually caught it on a spreadsheet as a quantifiable negative metric.
It wasn't just an opinion. It was a mathematical liability.
Explain the mechanics of why that shift happened.
Historically, The entire concept of sales was built on information asymmetry.
Meaning one side knew more than the other.
Right. The seller held all the cards. If you were a buyer in 1995 looking to purchase a fleet of corporate vehicles or a massive enterprise software system, how did you get information?
You couldn't Google it.
You couldn't read peer reviews. You absolutely had to engage with a salesperson.
They were the gatekeepers.
Exactly.
Mhm.
The salesperson controlled the flow of information regarding pricing, features, and competitors. And because they controlled the information, they had the leverage to use aggressive, high-pressure tactics.
This price is only good until Friday, take it or leave it.
Because the buyer had no way to verify if that was true.
The buyer was essentially held hostage by their need for information.
But the internet completely inverted that power dynamic.
Power shifted to the buyer.
Totally.
Yeah.
Today, buyers have access to near-perfect information. Before a modern buyer ever agrees to a 30-minute phone call with a sales rep, they have already researched the product extensively.
They've read massive Reddit threads dissecting every flaw in your software.
They have looked at your pricing page, and they have probably evaluated 3 of your top competitors. They are deeply educated and highly empowered.
Which means the baseline requirement for a salesperson fundamentally changes.
Yes.
If the buyer already knows what the product does and how much it costs, a salesperson who just aggressively pitches features is entirely redundant.
Worse than redundant, honestly. They are annoying.
They are a massive statistical liability.
If an empowered, educated buyer feels like they are being strong-armed, manipulated, or talked down to, they don't have to tolerate it anymore.
They will just hang up the phone, send your emails to spam, and go buy from your competitor.
Exactly. The data clearly demonstrated that in this new environment, buyers demand salespeople who act as expert consultants.
They need a trusted advisor.
Someone who is intelligent enough to understand their complex, specific business problems and helpful enough to guide them toward a customized solution.
If you cannot add value beyond what the buyer can find in a 5-minute Google search, you are just irrelevant.
Completely irrelevant.
So as a leader building this machine, your regression analysis is telling you to prioritize intellectual curiosity, empathy, and consultative ability over aggressiveness and slick presentation skills.
You have followed the data.
You map these traits out. You build your custom hiring formula based on your unique current buyer context. You've engineered the perfect profile.
Sounds perfect.
It seems like the logical endpoint is to just lock that formula in, hand the PDF to your HR department, and focus on the next fire. You're done, right?
And that assumption is the final pitfall that traps scaling companies.
Why?
Because finding your formula is not a static one-and-done event. It cannot be permanently locked in.
It can't.
No. The text reveals that the HubSpot team reran their complex regression analysis, reevaluating exactly which traits correlated with success every 6 to 12 months.
Every 6 to 12 months. From an operational standpoint, that sounds absolutely exhausting.
It's a lot of work.
If you have done the rigorous work to find the winning formula, why on earth would you tear it down or rebuild it twice a year?
Because the terrain is constantly shifting. A growing business is an incredibly volatile organism. Let's look at the variables that change as a startup scales.
Okay.
First, your product evolves. In year 1, you might be selling a clunky basic tool to small mom-and-pop shops.
Right.
By year 3, you have added massive enterprise features, and you are selling to Fortune 500 chief information officers.
That is a completely different conversation.
Entirely different. Second, buyer preferences and market awareness shift.
How so?
Well, in year 1, you are selling to visionary early adopters. These are people who tolerate bugs and love the big picture evangelistic pitch. They want to hear how you are going to change the world.
They buy the dream.
Exactly. But by year 4, you are trying to cross the chasm and sell to the early majority. These are risk-averse procurement managers.
They don't care about the dream.
They don't care about changing the world at all. They care about compliance, security integration, and a rigorous documented ROI.
The visionary salesperson who crushed it in year 1 will completely fail in front of a rigid procurement committee.
100%. And then you have the competitive landscape. When you start, maybe you are the only one doing this. By year 4, you have 3 well-funded competitors aggressively trying to steal your market share.
So the buyer context has morphed from "what is this?" to "why are you 10% more expensive than these other guys?"
Precisely. The wave you are surfing is constantly changing shape. Therefore, the ideal salesperson profile required to navigate that specific wave must adapt in tandem.
If you don't continually rerun your regression analysis, you will find yourself hiring brilliant people for the market you were in 2 years ago, rather than the market you are in today.
Which is a very expensive mistake to make.
This is such a profound operational blueprint, because what it does is it removes the ego and the institutional bias from the whole process.
It takes the emotion out of it.
Instead of a new VP of sales coming in and saying, well, at my last company, we hired aggressive closers, so we are going to do that here, or relying on some manager's outdated gut feeling.
The organization has a living, breathing mechanism.
They have a constantly updated, mathematically sound map of exactly which characteristics matter right now for this specific stage of evolution.
It builds systemic adaptability right into the DNA of the company. The organization itself becomes a learning machine, continuously optimizing its own inputs based on the shifting reality of the market.
That is the ultimate manifestation of an engineering mindset applied to human capital.
It really is.
This has been an incredibly dense journey, so let's synthesize this for everyone listening.
Let's bring it all together.
Let's extract the absolute soul of this deep dive. If there is one overarching insight that you need to take away and apply to your own business, it is this. Scaling your revenue is no longer reliant on the mysterious, unpredictable art of finding naturally gifted, charismatic salespeople.
You do not have to rely on luck, and you do not have to rely on heroes.
By applying a rigorous analytical engineering mindset, you can deconstruct the sales process and build a highly predictable machine.
But the critical caveat, the warning label slapped across this entire machine, is that your formula is entirely proprietary.
Right. You cannot borrow another company's blueprint.
You must have the discipline to prioritize hiring above all the other daily fires. You must deeply and empathetically understand your own unique buyer context.
And you must be willing to continually test, iterate, and evolve your hiring criteria to meet the shifting demands of a highly educated, empowered market.
That's the formula.
That is the core of it. We now know that copying the hiring profile of Google or Salesforce is a recipe for disaster. We know that we have to engineer our own custom formula based on whether our buyers need evangelism, consultation, or sheer efficiency.
Yep.
But that leaves us staring at a massively, incredibly complex operational question.
How?
Exactly. Let's say you do the math. You realize your current buyer needs deep analytical skills and profound empathy.
Okay.
How do you actually figure out if the person sitting across from you in an interview possesses those specific subjective traits?
That's the hardest part.
How do you mathematically identify human characteristics? And perhaps even more daunting, how on earth do you reliably and consistently test for those deep psychological traits in a standard 30-minute job interview without just relying on your gut instinct again?
That is where the theory has to translate into a very specific, highly structured interviewing architecture. You have to remove the subjectivity from the human conversation.
And that is exactly what we are going to unpack in our next deep dive. We will be looking at how to build that specific architecture, how to turn the notoriously murky, bias-filled waters of a job interview into a clean, precise, measurable X-ray.
Ensuring that the components you put into your revenue machine are perfectly engineered for success.
Every single time. What if the stereotypical, that smooth-talking, aggressive closer you're picturing in your head right now, what if that is actually the absolute worst person you could hire for your team today?
I mean, it really goes against everything we're taught, right? But it's true.
Yeah, think about that for a second. Because back in 2007, an MIT engineer with literally zero sales experience set out to prove exactly that.
It's such a wild story. He just completely threw out the traditional interview playbook.
He did. He built this data-driven algorithm, and he used it to scale a tiny startup into a $100 million powerhouse.
And today, we're basically stealing his formula.
Exactly. Which brings us to the mission for this deep dive, because whether you're an entrepreneur trying to make your very first hire or, a manager trying to scale a massive team.
Or even just a professional wanting to understand what actually drives top performance right now.
Right. You are going to want to take notes. We are systematically unpacking the hiring methodology from Mark Roberge's The Sales Acceleration Formula.
Specifically zooming in on those first two chapters.
Yeah. We are stripping away the whole gut feeling and the dark art of hiring. We're replacing it with predictable, heavily researched science.
And the context of who built this formula is honestly just as important as the formula itself.
Right, because Roberge is not a traditional sales guy.
Not at all. He is fundamentally an engineer. I mean, he started his career writing code.
So when he joined HubSpot, which we should mention was a microscopic, completely unknown startup at the time, he brought a totally different lens.
Exactly. He walked into a department that usually operates on charisma and intuition, and he just brought metrics.
Rigid processes, ruthless iteration.
Yeah, he understood this very basic premise. A team of genuinely top performers will find a way to win under almost any circumstances.
Your entire business trajectory hinges on your ability to accurately identify those top performers before you even hire them.
It really does. And if you're a manager listening to this, you know the exact pain we are talking about here.
Oh, absolutely. You've probably hired someone who gave this flawless, highly polished interview, right?
And then 60 days later, you find out they absolutely refuse to use your CRM.
They alienate your best prospects. They fight you on every single piece of feedback.
It's just an incredibly expensive mistake.
So let's go back to 2007 and set the scene. Roberge joins as employee number 4.
Employee number 4, he's the very first true sales hire.
Now, in any early stage startup, the to-do list is just paralyzing. You have to build the product, figure out pricing.
Create training materials, write the pitch decks. It's endless.
Yet, out of all those blazing fires, he makes this highly deliberate, almost counterintuitive choice about where to allocate his time.
He really did. He chose to focus virtually all of his initial cognitive energy on engineering a world-class hiring program.
Which is wild. He completely deprioritized things that other leaders would consider urgent, like refining the pitch.
Or building complex forecasting models. But his rationale was brilliantly simple.
What was it?
He realized that even if he developed the greatest, most sophisticated training program in the world, it would never be enough to offset a team of mediocre people.
Wow. Right. So world-class hiring is literally the single most important lever you can pull.
Exactly. Winning a big account helps you survive the quarter, sure. But building a reproducible machine that identifies top talent, that helps you win the war for the next decade.
But the journey to building that machine started with a pretty spectacular failure, didn't it?
It did. He basically did what I think 99% of us would logically do if we were tasked with building a team from scratch.
He went out into the market and aggressively recruited those top-performing veterans.
Right, the high-activity folks from established, successful companies.
He looked for the people who were already crushing their quotas elsewhere.
Gave them the full-court press, brought these supposed top dogs into his startup, and the results
Failed.
completely and utterly struggle.
So wait, why? And this actually leads to his first major data-backed revelation, right?
Yeah, and it's a tough pill to swallow for anyone looking for like a universal quick fix.
The revelation is that the ideal hiring formula is not static.
Not at all. It is entirely different for every single company. It depends almost entirely on the company's highly specific buyer context.
Okay, let's pause and define buyer context, because I feel like it's easy to gloss over that phrase.
Sure.
If aggressive closing is suddenly a liability, it sounds like modern revenue generation is less about persuasion and more about something else entirely.
Exactly. To understand why those top dogs failed, you have to look at where they came from versus where they landed.
Okay, so where did they come from?
These reps initially came from environments with highly transactional sales processes, well-understood markets.
Like if they were selling payroll software or IT hardware.
Right. The buyer already knew what the product was. The value proposition was totally established.
So in that context, the salesperson's superpower was sheer volume.
Just high activity, banging the phones, pushing past objections, and muscling through a high volume of transactions.
But HubSpot in 2007 was a completely different universe.
Completely different universe.
Yeah.
They were selling a concept they literally invented called inbound marketing.
Which had zero brand recognition. I mean, nobody was even searching for it.
So this wasn't a transactional sale at all. It was an evangelistic, highly educational sale.
Imagine the cognitive dissonance there. You have these high-activity transactional people used to a market that already understands their product.
And suddenly, they're forced to educate deeply confused buyers.
Right. A typical call back then involved a prospect asking, what even is this? How does a blog make me money?
And those aggressive closers just weren't equipped with the patience or the diagnostic skills to succeed in that unique context.
Their specific strengths, closing hard and handling objections, were totally misaligned with a market that needed a teacher, not a shark.
Exactly. So Roberge realizes there is no universal cookie-cutter mold for a great hire.
He needs to figure out what kind of psychological profile is ideal for his specific company at that specific moment.
And this is where the engineer really takes over. He starts tracking everything.
He lists, what, a dozen characteristics he thinks might theoretically correlate with success?
Yeah, and he defines them on a scale of 1 to 10. He creates a rigid interview scorecard so every candidate is evaluated against the exact same metrics.
And then he just waits. He lets them start working, and he observes how they actually perform on the floor.
Right, and after accumulating enough data points over a significant period, he brings it all together using a formal regression analysis.
Okay, for the listeners who might not live in spreadsheets all day, how would you define a regression analysis?
It's essentially a statistical method. You use it to figure out the relationship between a dependent variable, in this case, how much revenue the person actually generated on the job,
Okay.
and one or more independent variables, which are those 1 to 10 scores from their initial interview scorecard.
So it's a way of isolating the signal from the noise.
Exactly. You are asking the math, which of these traits actually moved the needle and which ones are just distractions?
You map the interview scores against real-world performance.
Right. You're looking for a high correlation. If everyone who scored a 9 on technical skill ended up blowing their quotas out of the water.
And everyone who scored a 3 missed their quotas, you have a strong positive correlation.
Yes. You let the data tell you what matters, effectively removing human bias and subjectivity from the hiring formula.
And the results of that first regression analysis were genuinely shocking. I mean, they completely upended a century of conventional business wisdom.
They really did. When he looked at the data, the traditional traits, the things every hiring manager looks for, like closing ability, convincing persuasion, objection handling.
They didn't just have a low correlation with success.
No, they had a massive, undeniable negative correlation with success.
Wait, I really want to challenge this because it feels so counterintuitive.
It does.
I understand that different environments require different skills. Like if you take a brilliant software engineer and ask them to perform open heart surgery, they're going to fail. But shouldn't a salesperson, regardless of whether they are selling a commodity or an evangelistic new software, eventually need to close the deal?
That's the logical assumption.
Right. How can being highly skilled at getting a prospect to sign a contract actually make you worse at your job?
It's a crucial question. And to answer it, we have to look beyond the individual salesperson.
Okay, where do we look?
We have to look at the massive macroeconomic shift that happened around the time this data was collected.
The internet.
The internet fundamentally, permanently shifted the balance of power from the seller to the buyer.
Think about how people used to make major purchases in the 80s or 90s. The seller held an absolute monopoly on information.
They had the pricing sheets, they had the feature lists.
The competitive comparisons were literally locked in their briefcases.
Exactly. If you wanted to buy an industrial machine or a fleet of vehicles, you had to engage with a salesperson just to get the basic facts.
The buyer was completely at their mercy. The seller controlled the flow of data.
And in that environment of information asymmetry, an aggressive, convincing closer could absolutely strong-arm a prospect into a purchase.
Because the buyer had no other way to navigate the market.
Right. But the modern landscape, today's buyers have near-perfect information sitting in their pockets.
Long before they ever agree to speak to a human being at your company, they have already researched your product.
They have read granular reviews from your current and former customers.
We've watched third-party breakdown videos on YouTube. They have compared your pricing tiers to your top 3 competitors.
They are showing up to the call, already knowing exactly what they want and exactly what it should cost.
So because they are empowered with that immense amount of information, they will absolutely no longer tolerate being strong-armed.
The psychology of the buyer has totally changed. If a rep comes in hot, trying to aggressively handle objections and push for a hard close,
the modern buyer simply puts up an immediate, impenetrable wall.
they hang up the phone,
Yeah.
they route your emails to spam.
Today's empowered buyer responds to individuals who act as intelligent, highly helpful consultants.
Aggressive closing tactics are a massive liability in a landscape where the buyer holds the power.
Because those tactics instantly destroy the trust required to make a modern transaction happen.
It's the difference between a predator and a guide. If you're operating in today's digital world, the data proves that being helpful and intellectually agile wins out.
Over being aggressive and high pressure. Which leads us to the most important question.
Right. If closing ability, objection handling, and persuasive charm are actively harmful, what is actually helpful.
What did the regression analysis reveal as the ultimate predictors of success?
Through continuous iteration, Roberge identified 5 key traits that consistently, overwhelmingly correlated with top performance.
These became the foundational pillars of his custom hiring formula.
They are coachability, curiosity, prior success, intelligence, and work ethic.
Let's really take our time and unpack these one by one, because the mechanics of how you test for these traits are fascinating.
Let's start with the absolute heavy hitter, the trait that carried the most statistical weight in the entire regression analysis.
Coachability.
Coachability is defined in the text as the ability to absorb and immediately apply coaching.
It sounds simple on the surface, but accurately evaluating it in a 45-minute window is actually an incredibly complex psychological exercise.
It consumed the majority of the interview process.
Because you can't just slide a piece of paper across the table and ask, "Are you coachable?"
Everyone will nod and say yes.
No.
Every single candidate believes they take feedback well.
You have to design a crucible, you have to test it in real time under pressure.
And the sources detail a highly specific 3-step interview methodology designed to strip away the candidate's facade.
This 3-step process is genuinely a masterclass in behavioral interviewing. So step 1 is the setup.
Right. You don't just chat about the resume, you immediately immerse them in a role-play scenario that closely mirrors your actual buyer context.
So if you're the hiring manager, you establish the rules of engagement. You say something like, "Okay, we're going to do a live role play."
I want you to imagine I have the VP of marketing at a mid-sized logistics company.
You are the account executive. You saw that I visited your website last night and downloaded a technical white paper.
We are going to simulate that first follow-up call. Your goal is not to sell me anything. Your goal is to do some light discovery.
And see if it makes sense to schedule a longer meeting. Ready? Go.
And then they execute the role play. Now here is the secret. The candidate's actual mechanical performance in that first attempt is largely irrelevant.
Wait, really? Whether they stumble over their words or ask the wrong questions, that doesn't matter.
That is not what is being evaluated. The true test begins the exact second the role play ends.
Okay, so what is step 2?
Step 2 is the self-diagnosis.
Yeah.
The hiring manager immediately stops the simulation and asks, "Okay, great effort. How do you think you did?"
Oh, wow. If you're a candidate listening to this, you need to understand that this is the ultimate trap.
It really is.
Because when you are sitting in a high-stakes interview, your biological instinct is to project absolute unflappable confidence.
You want to puff out your chest and say, "I think I nailed it. I controlled the conversation."
But the data explicitly shows that if a candidate simply states, "I did great," and stops talking, you should probably end the interview right there.
It is a massive red flag. It demonstrates a critical lack of self-awareness.
So what is the hiring manager meticulously looking for in this self-diagnosis phase?
A reflective, highly analytical self-critique. You want to see if the candidate possesses the cognitive distance to analyze their own performance in real time.
A highly coachable candidate will pause, think, and say, "Well, I think I built decent rapport up front, but I noticed I struggled when you asked that specific technical question."
I also think I rushed to pitch the product, instead of digging deeper into why you downloaded the white paper in the first place.
You essentially want them to do the manager's job for them. You want to hire someone who naturally analyzes their own game tape before anyone even asks them to.
Precisely. And once the candidate provides that self-critique, the hiring manager steps in to build on it.
They move to step 3, absorb and apply.
The manager transitions by saying, "In every interview, I like to provide one piece of positive feedback and one area for improvement."
Let me stop you there because we really need to explore the psychology of that specific phrasing.
The praise sandwich.
Right, why the praise sandwich? If the goal is to test how they handle brutal reality, why soften the blow by starting with positive feedback?
Why not just get straight to the critique and see if they crack?
Exactly.
It all comes down to behavioral neuroscience. If a hiring manager, who is an authority figure, suddenly launches into a list of things the candidate did wrong,
the candidate's brain registers that as a threat.
their amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for the fight or flight response, literally hijacks their nervous system.
They freeze up. They become defensive.
Blood flow actually shifts away from the prefrontal cortex, which is the logic and learning center of the brain.
Wow. So if you trigger that fight or flight response, you can no longer accurately evaluate their cognitive ability to learn new concepts.
Because their brain is just trying to survive the social threat.
That is fascinating. So by leading with genuine specific praise, saying something like, "I thought your tonality was excellent," You intentionally regulate their nervous system.
You keep their prefrontal cortex online. You strike a warm, collaborative tone.
The candidate relaxes, their ego feels safe, and they remain neurologically receptive to new information.
Once you have established that safety, you deliver the coaching. You say, the area I'd like to see improvement in is the depth of your questioning.
You asked what my goal was, but you didn't ask why that goal matters to my business.
Let me show you a framework we use here to deepen that discovery. And the manager will literally stand up, go to a whiteboard, and teach a complex concept right there.
You are watching how they receive the data. Are they staring blankly, or are they leaning forward, taking furious notes?
And then comes the hammer. You finish the lesson, sit back down, and ask them to immediately redo the exact same role play.
But this time, they have to seamlessly integrate the new framework you just taught them.
This is the ultimate stress test for coachability.
I have to say, asking someone to instantly change their ingrained behavior, internalize a complex new framework, and perform it flawlessly on the spot.
While sitting across from a VP of sales.
Yeah, that sounds borderline cruel. Are we genuinely expecting humans to be perfect on the second try?
Not at all. And understanding this nuance is the key to the entire methodology.
Okay, what's the data say?
Out of over 1,000 interviews conducted using this exact method, the data revealed that perhaps only 5 candidates executed the second role play flawlessly.
Only 5 out of 1,000. Okay, that makes me feel significantly better about my own interview skills.
The goal of this exercise is absolutely not perfection. The goal is observable effort.
Because when a candidate is thrust into that second role play, their working memory is maxed out. Their head is spinning.
What the interviewer is evaluating is the conscious, visible attempt to fundamentally alter their approach based on the new data.
If you can witness even a slight, clumsy, but meaningful behavioral shift in a 10-minute window under intense psychological pressure.
Imagine the trajectory of that individual when you give them a month of full-time dedicated training in a supportive environment.
That is the essence of coachability, the raw capacity for rapid behavioral adaptation.
Exactly. So if you are interviewing for a role anytime soon, this is your blueprint.
Do not let your ego prevent you from proactively diagnosing your own mistakes out loud. It doesn't make you look weak. It demonstrates immense emotional maturity.
And if you are a manager tasked with hiring, you must build rubrics that test for adaptability, not just polish.
A candidate who gives a slick, perfectly rehearsed first performance is useless to you if they become rigid the moment you offer a correction.
That perfectly sets up our transition to the second major trait.
Because if coachability proves that a candidate has the capacity to learn from you, the manager, you then need to determine if they possess the capacity to learn from the market.
And that brings us to trait 2, curiosity.
Curiosity. In a revenue-generating context, curiosity is the ultimate anti-pitch.
It really is. The source text defines curiosity specifically as the ability to deeply understand a potential customer's unique business context.
Through highly effective questioning and active listening.
When Roberge lectures at MIT and asks his students to describe a great salesperson, they invariably throw out words like aggressive, charismatic, or great presenter.
But the data proves that top performers are, at their core, naturally relentlessly curious.
They do not talk at prospects, they act as investigators.
They ask layered questions, listen intently to the nuance of the answer, and probe further into areas of friction.
And the genius of this methodology is how it tests for this trait before the formal interview even officially begins.
It relies on something called the lobby test.
The lobby test is brilliant in its simplicity. From the exact moment you walk out to the reception area, shake the candidate's hand and say, "Hello, my name is Mark."
The evaluation is live. The hiring manager is paying acute attention to the candidate's very first conversational impulse.
Do they immediately launch into a rehearsed elevator pitch about their own resume and how great they are?
Or did they start by asking a question about you?
You're looking for evidence of preparation and outward focus. Did they research your background on LinkedIn?
Do they say, "Mark, I saw on your profile that you recently spoke at a sauce conference in Chicago. I'm curious how the audience reacted to your point about customer retention."
Yes. And it doesn't stop there. Based on your response, do they ask intelligent follow-up questions?
If a candidate is respectfully but persistently interviewing you while you walk from the lobby to the conference room.
That is a massive, statistically significant green flag for natural curiosity.
The second, more formal test occurs back inside the role-play scenario we discussed earlier.
Right, remember, the manager is pretending to be a VP of marketing who just downloaded an ebook.
The candidate simulates the follow-up call, And the source material outlines two wildly different ways this can go.
They call it the disaster scenario and the yes scenario.
Let's actually simulate both so you can viscerally feel the difference in the approach. Let's do the disaster scenario first. Ring, ring.
Hi, this is Mark.
Hi, Mark. This is Jess. Did I catch you at a bad time?
I only have about 1 minute before a meeting.
Great. Well, I am not sure how much you know about my company, but we have an all-in-one platform that helps logistics companies get found online. We've worked with major brands and helped them increase revenue by 20%. I'm calling to see if you would be open to a 10-minute call next week.
Disaster. An absolute, unmitigated disaster.
This kind of makes you cringe just hearing it.
In sales parlance, we call that showing up and throwing up.
The candidate took zero time to understand the buyer's state of mind. It's just a rehearsed, feature-heavy elevator pitch blindly hurled at the prospect.
Without any contextual grounding. Now, let's contrast that with a curious approach. The yes scenario. Ring, ring.
Hi, this is Mark.
Hi, Mark. This is Jess. Did I catch you at a bad time?
I only have 1 minute.
Understood. Mark, I noticed you downloaded our ebook last night regarding generating B2B leads on Facebook. I know you're busy, so I'll be brief. What specific questions were you hoping that ebook would answer about your strategy?
Pause right there and notice the structural difference. The candidate didn't pitch a single feature.
They immediately anchored the entire conversation to the buyer's specific recent action.
And they asked an open-ended diagnostic question. Because of that approach, my resistance drops.
You'd respond, well, I was just doing some late-night research. We're trying to find case studies of companies that have actually seen a positive ROI on Facebook.
That makes complete sense, and I'm happy to send some relevant case studies over. Just so I send the right ones, have you attempted to run any Facebook campaigns internally yet?
We have, yes. We ran one last quarter.
And how did the leadership team feel about the results?
They were just okay. Honestly, a bit disappointing.
Disappointing in what way? Did you struggle with the cost per click, or was it a lead quality issue?
There's definitely lead quality. We generated a lot of emails, but I'm pretty sure the people who click the ads are too small to afford our service.
That is incredibly common. Out of curiosity, how does your team currently define a qualified lead versus an unqualified one? And what specific targeting parameters did you use?
Yes, that is world-class curiosity in action.
If we break down the mechanics of why that works, it's essentially identical to going to a doctor.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Imagine you have a terrible pain in your knee, you go to a specialist. If that doctor walked into the exam room, took one single glance at you, didn't ask a single question, and just confidently handed you a prescription for invasive knee surgery,
You would run out of the building. You wouldn't trust them.
a great doctor is a diagnostician. They poke, they prod, they ask where it hurts, they order an MRI.
And that perfectly illustrates the behavioral shift required in modern business. A great revenue generator educates buyers through the specific questions they ask.
Not through the statements they make. It's not about dispensing a list of product features.
It's about systematically eliciting introspection from the buyer.
A truly great question makes the buyer pause and think, nobody has ever asked me to clarify that specific metric before. I don't actually know the answer.
By being relentlessly, genuinely curious, the professional builds profound trust.
And it is that established trust that earns them the right to ask the hard, uncomfortable, personal business questions that actually lead to a transaction.
You do not earn trust by talking about how great your product is.
Okay, so we have deeply explored coachability and curiosity. Now we move to trait 3, prior success.
The regression analysis defined this as a documented history of top performance or remarkable achievement.
Out of all 5 traits, prior success is the most objectively measurable, assuming the candidate has a traditional background.
If they are already in the industry, you aren't looking for vague, qualitative statements like, I did really well at my last company.
Or I was a key contributor. You are hunting for concrete, rank-based, verifiable data.
You want to hear, I was ranked number 6 out of 125 account executives based on annual recurring revenue generated in the 2022 fiscal year.
You want specifics.
Yeah.
You want undeniable proof that they operated in the top 10% of their peer group.
You want to understand the exact mathematical metric that ranking is based on and ensure that their references can seamlessly verify that exact performance data.
But the source text highlights a really fascinating conundrum here.
What's that?
What if you are building a team and you want to hire outside the traditional talent pool? What if they don't have a background in enterprise software?
The sources mention that during HubSpot's massive growth phase, they successfully hired an Olympic gold medalist
A professional cellist who played for the Portland Symphony.
and a former stand-up comedian who'd featured on Comedy Central.
It begs the question, how do you measure prior success if they haven't sold a single software license in their entire lives?
The methodology argues that the core principle remains exactly the same.
Yeah.
You aggressively look for top 10% performance in any meaningful, rigorous pursuit.
I have to throw a red flag on this one because it feels like a dangerous leap of logic.
How so?
Playing the cello beautifully requires immense talent, but it has absolutely nothing to do with navigating a complex 6-month B2B procurement process.
Right.
Being funny on Comedy Central doesn't mean you have the organizational skills to manage a pipeline of 200 leads in a CRM. Aren't we making a massive mistake by confusing general talent with a highly specific business skill?
It's a very valid challenge, and it's a mistake many hiring managers make. But the core insight here is that you aren't hiring the cellist for their ability to play the cello.
You are hiring them because of the underlying psychological makeup required to achieve that elite level of mastery.
People who manage to perform at a world-class level in any highly competitive discipline, whether that is the Olympic Games, a national symphony orchestra, or elite stand-up comedy.
They possess a unique foundational architecture in their brain.
They have an intense, burning passion. They have an extreme competitive drive.
And most importantly, they have a profound understanding of what it takes to grind through failure week after week, year after year, to achieve excellence.
Ah, I see. They fundamentally understand the mechanics of practice. They know how to obsess over the microscopic details of their craft.
Exactly. I like to use a linguistic analogy. Imagine you're trying to hire someone to write poetry in Italian.
Okay.
You could hire someone who knows a few basic Italian words, or you could hire someone who is already a master award-winning poet in Spanish.
The Spanish poet doesn't know Italian vocabulary yet, but they already deeply understand the complex, foundational grammar of poetry.
Rhythm, metaphor, structure, you just have to teach them the new Italian vocabulary.
The mechanical skills of running a software demonstration or updating a CRM are just vocabulary. They can easily be taught.
But you cannot easily teach the foundational structural drive to achieve greatness.
When you take individuals who already possess that world-class psychological architecture and you plug them into a highly structured, metric-driven business methodology,
they inevitably rise to the top. They apply the exact same relentless rigor to mastering your sales process that they applied to mastering their instrument.
that reframes it perfectly. You are hiring for the psychological infrastructure, knowing you can teach the mechanical application.
Okay, let's pivot to trait 4, intelligence.
In the context of this specific regression analysis, intelligence has a very narrow, highly operational definition.
It is not about possessing a stratospheric IQ, and it's certainly not about being good at academic trivia.
It is defined as cognitive agility, the ability to learn highly complex, abstract concepts rapidly.
And then this is the crucial second half. Communicate those complex concepts back to a layman in an easy-to-understand, digestible manner.
And the way Roberge tested for this cognitive agility is incredibly demanding. He didn't just ask them logic puzzles or brain teasers.
He effectively forced them to start their rigorous employee training program before they were even offered the job.
It's a brilliant filter. At the conclusion of a preliminary high-level phone screen, if he liked the candidate, he would assign them substantial homework.
He would send them highly complex technical training materials regarding things like inbound marketing architecture,
Search engine optimization algorithms, and digital lead routing. He would tell them to study the material over the weekend.
Then, during the in-person interview, he would aggressively test both their retention of the data and their translation skills.
He would weave it into the role play. He would play the role of the confused prospect and say something like, "Okay, Jess, I noticed on your website that you offer SEO services."
I'm a logistics guy.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about computers. Could you explain to me simply how that actually works?
This specific prompt tests two distinct cognitive processors simultaneously. First, the basic retention processor. How accurately did they absorb the technical information from the weekend homework?
Do they actually understand how a search engine crawls a website?
But the second, vastly more important test is the translation processor. How effectively can they strip away the intimidating industry jargon?
Can they communicate those concepts back to a deeply confused prospect using simple analogies?
To really stress test their cognitive limits, the interviewer will act increasingly confused, asking deeper, more nuanced follow-up questions.
Until the candidate's working memory is finally maxed out and they are stumped. The deeper the candidate can navigate down that intellectual rabbit hole before faltering, the higher their intelligence score on the rubric.
But I want to bring up the concept of buyer context again, because we established earlier that there is no universal formula.
Is high intelligence, this specific type of rapid cognitive agility, always absolutely necessary?
What if I am a manager listening to this, and my team sells something incredibly straightforward and highly commoditized?
Let's say we sell standard bulk paper cups to local restaurant chains. There is no technical complexity.
Do I really need to hire a cognitive genius, or is that actually overkill that might lead to boredom and turnover?
It's a highly astute observation, and the data absolutely supports your skepticism. Intelligence is not universally the top predictor of success across all industries.
Remember the very first revelation of the chapter. The ideal hiring formula depends entirely on your specific market context.
If you are selling commoditized paper cups, your product architecture is not changing week to week. The buyer intrinsically understands exactly what a paper cup is and what it does.
In that specific context, a relentless blue-collar work ethic and a massive volume of daily activity will absolutely trump high cognitive intelligence.
You just need someone willing to knock on 100 doors a day.
But the software industry in 2007 was the exact opposite of paper cups.
Exactly. To give the listeners some historical context, when HubSpot was building this team, Twitter was still a garage project. The iPhone had barely launched.
The entire global landscape of digital marketing and search algorithms was violently shifting every single month.
If you operate in a rapidly evolving, highly innovative industry like technology, biotech, or modern finance, your representatives absolutely must possess the cognitive agility to keep pace.
They have to understand the nuanced implications of a sudden Google algorithm update and then act as a trusted translator.
Explaining to a panicked buyer exactly how that abstract technical change negatively impacts their specific business strategy.
That level of consultative translation requires a tremendously high degree of specific working intelligence.
Which brings us perfectly to the fifth and final trait, which serves as the engine block for the entire operation: work ethic.
The text defines it as proactively pursuing the company mission with a high degree of energy, resilience, and daily activity. Basically the raw hustle factor.
Work ethic is universally desired by every manager on Earth, but the methodology admits a harsh truth.
What's that?
It is arguably the single hardest human trait to accurately evaluate during a standard, sterile interview process.
Oh, absolutely. Anyone can sit in a conference room chair for 45 minutes, maintain good posture, and confidently claim to be a tireless hard worker.
Right. Nobody walks into a job interview and says, "Actually, my greatest weakness is that I really prefer to coast, do the bare minimum, and take 3-hour lunches."
Everyone wears the mask of the relentless grinder. So how do you scientifically pierce through that interview facade?
The text provides 3 highly specific tactical workarounds to crack this puzzle. The first relies on micro-observations during the interview process itself.
This is about quietly evaluating their behavioral data outside the confines of the formal questioning. It's the meta-interview.
How rapidly do they return your phone calls or reply to your scheduling emails?
If you request a minor deliverable, like an updated resume or a brief written assessment, do they turn it around in 4 hours with high attention to detail?
Or do they take 3 days and require a reminder? Do they proactively push the pace of the interview process, sending thoughtful follow-up notes?
Or do you, as the recruiter, find yourself constantly having to chase them down?
Those seemingly minor micro-behaviors are actually massive, highly accurate leading indicators of their baseline hustle and operational velocity.
The second workaround relies on a structural shift in behavioral questioning. Instead of asking a binary, useless question like, "Are you a hard worker?"
You ask them to vividly describe the mechanics of a typical work day or a typical work week in their current role.
You are listening closely for evidence of rigorous, self-imposed routines.
No.
Do they mention time blocking their calendar?
Do they have non-negotiable daily habits for prospecting? People with elite work ethic naturally build highly structured systems to protect their time.
Exactly. But the third workaround is where the real psychological magic happens. It is a technique designed to extract the truth from third parties.
It's called the forced ranking reference check.
This might be one of the most devious, brilliant tactical hacks in the entire deep dive.
Let's break down why traditional reference checks are totally broken. Normally, if you call a candidate's former manager and ask, "Was this person a hard worker?"
What are they going to say? They will always say yes. It is a completely useless data point.
Because basic social convention dictates that you do not actively sabotage a former colleague's career unless they were a truly catastrophic, malicious employee.
The former manager wants to be nice. They want to help the person out. So they offer vague platitudes, and you get a false positive.
Right. So instead of asking a binary question, you completely corner the reference using psychological constraints.
You get the former manager on the phone, you build some quick rapport, and then you say, I am evaluating this candidate against our core rubric.
I have 4 specific traits here: coachability, curiosity, intelligence, and work ethic.
Could you please take a moment and force rank these 4 traits for this candidate, from their absolute strongest to their relative weakest, and then walk me through the specific rationale for your ranking?
It is a phenomenal, highly effective psychological tactic because it removes the option to simply be nice.
But wait, let me push back on this because I can see a major flaw. If I am a busy former manager and some recruiter calls me and tries to force me to explicitly rank my former employee's worst trait on a recorded line,
My immediate instinct is to get defensive. I might just say, they are great at all 4. Or I might just try to end the call to avoid throwing the candidate under the bus.
does this aggressive tactic actually work in the real world without alienating the reference?
It works precisely because it is not aggressive. It is comparative. You aren't asking the manager what is their worst trait.
You are asking them, of these 4 incredibly positive, highly desirable traits, which one is their most dominant and which one is their least dominant?
It's like asking someone to rank their 4 favorite movies. They might genuinely love all 4 films, but by forcing them to allocate the number 4 slot to one of them,
You learn an immense amount about the granular nuances of their actual taste.
by forcing the former manager to rank the traits, they have to put something at the bottom of the list. They are forced to provide a genuine comparative critique without feeling like they are sabotaging the candidate.
I see. You are giving them social permission to be critical because the structure demands it.
And what's brilliant from a data perspective is that it allows the hiring manager to cross-reference multiple streams of information.
You take the candidate's self-assessment from the role play. You take your own micro-observations from the interview scorecard.
And now you have the forced ranking assessment from a third-party former manager. When you align those 3 disparate data points, the noise vanishes.
You get a highly accurate, statistically validated view of their actual work ethic and hustle, completely stripped of the usual interview platitudes.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground, so let's step back, zoom out, and look at the entire architectural blueprint we've uncovered today.
We've gone deep into the mechanics of the 5 traits. Coachability. The neurological capacity to suppress the ego, absorb critical feedback, and rapidly alter behavior.
Curiosity. The diagnostic mindset required to uncover the buyer's true pain through relentless questioning.
Prior success.
Yeah.
The foundational psychological architecture of an elite performer, regardless of their background.
Intelligence. The cognitive agility to act as a trusted, real-time translator of complex ideas.
And work ethic. The relentless structured daily hustle. How do we tie all of these disparate threads together? What is the singular overarching philosophy of this chapter?
If we synthesize all of this data, the core, undeniable insight is that building a world-class revenue team is no longer a mystical dark art.
It is absolutely not about trusting your gut instinct to find a charismatic, backslapping extrovert with a fat Rolodex.
The advent of the digital age has fundamentally permanently killed the aggressive high-pressure salesman because the buyer now holds the ultimate information advantage.
The old playbook is dead.
The era of the sleazy, high-pressure closer who tricks you into signing a contract is over.
Completely over in any modern, complex environment. Today, scaling a business is a predictable, manageable science.
The modern revenue generator is not a closer. They are a highly curious, intensely adaptable, cognitively agile consultant.
They outwork their competition through rigorous, structured daily activity. And they win deals not by applying pressure, but by accurately diagnosing complex business problems.
And gently guiding the empowered, highly educated buyer to a logical, mutually beneficial conclusion.
It's about meticulously engineering an interview process that consistently identifies that exact psychological profile every single time, without fail.
And that realization should be incredibly empowering to anyone listening. It means you don't have to rely on luck. You don't have to hope the right person walks through the door.
You just have to be incredibly disciplined in your process.
Exactly. The mathematical formula exists. The blueprints have been drawn. You just have to customize it and apply it rigorously to your specific market context.
Which gives you, the listener, a very clear, actionable roadmap. Whether you are a founder building a grading rubric for your very first hire, a manager trying to fix a broken culture,
Or simply a professional looking in the mirror and assessing your own skill set against these 5 foundational traits.
you now possess the data-backed blueprint for what elite success actually looks like in the modern economy.
You know exactly what traits to target and exactly how to neurologically pressure test them.
You have the MRI machine for talent.
But, well, actually, now that you possess this ultimate formula, now that you know exactly how to hunt down and hire these highly coachable, intellectually curious unicorns.
You face a brand new, potentially catastrophic danger. What actually happens on their very first day of work?
Yes, the onboarding trap, the place where great hires go to die.
Exactly. Because if you do what 90% of traditional companies do, if you take this brilliant, carefully vetted new hire, and you simply pair them up with your current top-performing veteran for a month-long shadow program,
You might actually be permanently destroying their potential before they even pick up the phone.
it is arguably the single most common and mathematically most destructive training mistake in the modern corporate world.
But the behavioral science behind why the traditional ride-along is so incredibly toxic to new talent, and the specific step-by-step mathematical formula for how you should train them instead to guarantee their success.
Well, that is a complex puzzle for you to explore next.
It's the critical evolution from mastering the hiring formula to mastering the training formula.
Precisely. We started this deep dive talking about the broken, murky, gut-driven X-ray machine of traditional hiring.
Mark Roberge proved that when you stop looking for the aggressive closer and start scientifically testing for curiosity and coachability, the muddy waters clear up.
The science works. You just have to trust the data, put in the work, and build a machine.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one. What if the aggressive, fast-talking, high-pressure, the person you've always been told makes the absolutely perfect salesperson? What if they're actually the exact opposite of who you should be hiring today?
It's a completely wild thought, right?
Yeah.
But it's true.
Right, because think about the classic movie stereotype for a second. The slick talker in a sharp suit who, they simply will not take no for an answer.
Oh, yeah. The Glengarry Glen Ross type.
Exactly. The person who steamrolls objections, dominates the conversation, and practically bullies the prospect into signing on the dotted line. For decades, that was the archetype.
It was the gold standard.
Yeah, but what if bringing that specific personality type into your business today is actually, toxic to your bottom line?
Well, it's a complete paradigm shift, and the underlying mechanics of why it happened are just fascinating. Because the internet has fundamentally shattered the historical power dynamic between buyers and sellers.
Shattered it how? Like, what changed?
So it used to be that the seller held all the cards, right? All the pricing, all the information. But today, buyers have near perfect information at their fingertips.
Right, they can just Google everything.
Exactly. And because of that structural change in the market, the old art of sales, the manipulation, the high pressure, it's effectively dead.
Wow.
Yeah. If you are a founder or a hiring manager relying on your gut instinct to hire those old school hustlers, you're basically building a house on quicksand.
That makes so much sense. So let's lay out the roadmap for what we're doing today for the listener, because this completely flips the script on everything we think we know about building a revenue engine.
It really does.
Our mission for this deep dive is to extract the core insights from a seminal piece of business literature, specifically Chapter 3 of Mark Roberge's work on the sales acceleration formula.
Which is just a brilliant text.
It is. We've got a stack of notes, data points, and case studies from his tenure as the first sales hire at HubSpot. So today, we're unpacking the exact 5 traits that data proves make a great modern salesperson.
And more importantly, the tests to find them.
Right, the step-by-step interview tactics used to uncover those traits. So whether you're scaling a startup, building a team, or, just want to understand the psychology of high performance, this deep dive is going to give you a predictable, engineering-based formula for hiring top talent.
The word engineering is really the skeleton key to this entire methodology.
How so?
Well, Mark Roberge was not a traditional sales guy who just, worked his way up from the showroom floor.
Yeah.
He was an MIT-trained engineer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he actually started his career writing code. So when he was tasked with scaling HubSpot's sales team from literally 0 to $100 million in revenue, he looked at hiring the same way an engineer looks at a software bug.
That's a totally different lens.
Totally different. He didn't rely on gut feelings. He didn't care about a firm handshake, and he just threw out the traditional art of the unstructured interview.
So what did he use instead?
He relied on quantifiable data, rigid process, and, really rigorous psychological testing.
Okay, but before we even get into the 5 specific traits he uncovered, I feel like we have to understand the landscape. We have to understand why the ideal profile changed so drastically.
All right, the historical context.
Yeah. If you look at the old way of selling, say, 30 years ago, it felt very much like stepping onto a used car lot. The salesperson holds all the pricing data, the inventory knowledge, the technical specs.
They hold all the power.
Exactly. The buyer is at this severe informational disadvantage. The salesperson could afford to be pushy because if the buyer wanted the product, they had literally nowhere else to go to get that info. The salesperson was the gatekeeper.
Right, but put yourself in the shoes of a modern buyer today. Before you ever speak to a human being at a software company or a consulting firm, or honestly, even a car dealership, what have you already done?
I mean, I've already visited their website.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've read a dozen independent reviews on third-party sites.
Yeah, I've compared their pricing model against like 3 of their top competitors.
Right. You might have even watched a YouTube tutorial or started a 14-day free trial. You do not need a salesperson to read you the brochure.
Because I already memorized the brochure.
Exactly.
So if I'm a buyer and I already have all the information, what am I actually looking for when I finally, pick up the phone? My mind instantly goes to like a highly specialized medical doctor.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, because if my knee hurts, I don't go to the doctor and say, hey, sell me on this specific surgical procedure. I go in, I explain my symptoms, and I rely on their deep diagnostic expertise to figure out my specific problem before they ever prescribe a solution.
Right. They diagnose before they prescribe.
Exactly. A doctor doesn't pressure you, they consult you. So if the aggressive hustler is out, is the doctor what replaced it?
The data supports that analogy perfectly, actually. Roberge did something almost unheard of in sales management at the time. He ran a regression analysis on all of his sales hires.
Wait, a regression analysis?
Yeah.
We're talking about hiring salespeople, not like modeling climate change or predicting the stock market. What does that actually look like in a sales manager's office?
Well, it essentially looks like turning human behavior into math.
Okay, color me intrigued.
So he created a structured scorecard for every interview. Every single candidate was graded on a scale of 1 to 10 on a specific set of traits. Things like closing ability, objection handling, curiosity, prior success.
So he's tracking everything.
Everything. He collected all this interview data, and then months and years down the line, he mapped those initial interview scores against the candidate's actual real-world sales performance.
To see what actually worked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He wanted to isolate the variables. He wanted to mathematically prove which interview trait actually caused a person to hit their quota.
So he's essentially building a giant spreadsheet, taking the interview scores on one side, putting the revenue generated on the other side, and just, letting the math tell him who the winners are.
And the results sent absolute shockwaves through anyone with a traditional sales background.
Really? Why?
Because the traits traditionally associated with a quote-unquote killer sales rep, things like being aggressive or having strong objection handling, they didn't just have a zero correlation with success.
Wait, they didn't?
No, they had a terrible, strongly negative correlation with actual sales success.
A negative correlation, meaning like the harder they pushed in the interview, the worse they performed on the actual sales floor.
Yes.
The more aggressive they were, the less money they made the company.
Precisely. Because today's empowered buyer will simply not tolerate being strong-armed. The psychological friction is just too high.
Right. Nobody likes being bullied.
Exactly. If you push a modern buyer, they don't cave in. They just hang up and open a new tab for your competitor's website.
That is so true.
So what replaced that aggression, according to the math, is the ability to be a helpful, intelligent consultant. You have to actively stop looking for smooth talkers who try to manipulate prospects, and you have to start hunting for analytical advisors who genuinely want to solve complex problems.
Wow. Okay, which brings us to the actual traits. Let's start building this engineered scorecard for the listener. Because the number one trait, the absolute ultimate predictor of sales success in this entire data set, was not confidence.
Nope.
It was not charisma. It wasn't even industry experience. It was coachability.
Coachability, yeah. And it's defined as the ability to absorb and apply coaching.
It sounds so simple on the surface, honestly.
It does, but it is incredibly rare in practice. And it's notoriously difficult to evaluate if you don't know the psychological triggers to look for.
Why is this so critical, though?
Well, think about the environment of a scaling company or rapidly changing market. Your core product is going to update every quarter.
Right.
Your competitors are going to change their pricing. Your marketing messaging is going to pivot based on, I don't know, a new Google algorithm.
Everything is always in flux.
Exactly. So if a salesperson cannot take critical feedback from their manager, process it internally, and immediately change their external behavior, they become obsolete almost overnight.
Yeah, the problem I see here is testing for it. I mean, I can't just slide a resume across the desk and ask, hey, are you coachable?
Right, because they'll lie.
Obviously. Everyone knows how to play the interview game. They're all going to nod earnestly and say, oh, absolutely, I thrive on constructive criticism. I'm an open book.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Self-reporting is completely useless for a trait like this.
You cannot ask for the answer. You have to manufacture a situation where they demonstrate the answer.
Ooh, I like that. How do we do that?
You have to create what Roberge calls a behavioral exhaust in the interview room. To do this, the source material details this brilliant 3-step interview method.
Okay, let's break it down.
Step 1. You set up a role play, but there's a massive catch. You do not role play your company's product.
Wait, really?
Yeah. If I'm interviewing you for a job at my software company, I don't ask you to pitch me my own software.
Oh, because I don't know it yet. I'd be like fumbling over the features and you'd just be testing my memorization skills, not my actual sales ability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the trap most hiring managers fall into. Yeah. Instead, you ask the candidate to sell the product from their previous job.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they used to sell accounting services, you tell them, great, I am the VP of Finance at a mid-sized logistics company. Pitch me your accounting services. Go.
So it keeps the candidate in their ultimate comfort zone.
Yes. It establishes a baseline of their natural, uninhibited ability.
That makes total sense. You want to see their natural golf swing, so to speak, before you start tweaking their grip.
Exactly right.
So you run the mock call, they do their standard pitch, they ask their discovery questions, they handle a basic objection. You let them run the whole scenario, then what?
Step 2 is the self-evaluation and the critical coaching moment.
Okay.
As soon as the role play ends, you break character,
Yeah.
you look them in the eye and ask, how do you think that went?
Oh, putting them on the spot.
Yeah. First, you're checking for baseline self-awareness. Do they know they talked too much? Do they realize they missed a buying signal? After they answer, you provide specific, constructive, and slightly critical feedback. You might say, I really liked your icebreaker. You built great rapport, but you completely missed my financial goals.
Ouch.
Yeah, you tell them you didn't dig deep enough. Let me teach you how we do that at this company. Next time, I want you to pause and ask these 2 specific probing questions.
Oh, man. This is the danger zone. I can feel the tension just talking about it.
It gets uncomfortable.
Because this is the exact moment where human ego usually rears its ugly head.
Yeah.
I can just picture a candidate who was like a top performer at their last job, getting a slight critique from a stranger and instantly putting up their shields.
They get so defensive.
Yeah, they get defensive. They say things like, well, I normally would ask that, but we only had 5 minutes. Or at my old company, my manager specifically told us never to ask about budget that early.
And watching their physical and psychological reaction to that feedback is the entire point of the exercise.
You're just baiting them.
You're looking for microscopic behavioral tells. Are their eyes glazing over? Are their arms suddenly crossed? Are they making excuses to protect their ego?
Right.
Or, conversely, are they leaning in? Are they physically taking notes? Are they asking clarifying questions to make sure they fully understand the new framework you just handed them?
That's the divide right there.
It is. The defensive candidates have a fixed mindset. They view critique as an attack on their competence. The coachable candidates have a growth mindset. They view critique as free consulting to make them better.
And then comes step 3, which brings the hammer down. You run the exact same role play again, immediately.
You don't let them sleep on it. You say, okay, let's rewind the tape. Ring, ring. I'm picking up the phone again. Let's take it from the top.
Oh, wow.
And now you're looking for one outcome and one outcome only. Did they implement the specific feedback you gave them 3 minutes ago? Did their behavior actually change?
This is such a powerful diagnostic tool because you're testing their ego and their cognitive agility at the exact same time.
Cool.
Can they swallow their pride? And can their brain instantly map a new behavior onto an old, deeply ingrained habit? If they just launch into the exact same pitch again, making the same mistakes, with absolute certainty that they're going to be a nightmare to manage on the floor.
Is the ultimate filter. The rule is never hire someone without correcting them mid-interview.
That is a phenomenal rule.
It completely strips away the polished resume, the expensive suit, and the rehearsed answers. It shows you the raw, underlying operating system of their mind.
Right.
If they cannot adapt in a low-stakes interview, they will never adapt when a real prospect is screaming at them on the phone.
That is a phenomenal transition into trait number 2.
Yeah.
So we've figured out if they can learn from their manager. But how do we know if they can actually learn from the customer?
Yes.
That requires curiosity. And the definition of curiosity in this framework is highly specific. It is the ability to understand a customer's context through effective questioning and active listening. It's the absolute antidote to what salespeople call the dreaded show-up-and-throw-up elevator pitch.
The show-up-and-throw-up pitch is a toxic relic.
It's the worst.
It really is.
Yeah.
If a salesperson gets on a call and immediately launches into a breathless monologue about features, benefits, and awards their company won, they are essentially guessing.
Yeah.
They are throwing darts in a pitch-black room, praying that one of their bullet points happens to hit a nerve with the buyer. Curiosity is about turning the lights on before you throw the dart.
I love that. Turn the lights on.
Great salespeople ask questions in a way that feels organic, not like a police interrogation. They make the prospect feel deeply understood.
It's exactly like being at a Friday night dinner party. We have all had this experience.
Oh, absolutely.
You get cornered by a guest who just talks about themselves for 20 straight minutes. They talk about their promotion, their new car, their controversial opinions on the stock market.
And you're just looking for the exit.
Right. You stand there nodding, and when you finally escape, you feel physically drained. You think, that person is incredibly arrogant and boring.
Yeah.
But then, later in the night, you meet someone else. They ask you a thoughtful question about your career. When you answer, they don't pivot back to themselves. They ask a follow-up question that proves they were actually digesting your words.
They're actually listening.
Yes. You talk for 15 minutes. You walk away from that person thinking, wow, that person is a genius. They are incredibly charismatic. When in reality, they barely spoke a word.
The mechanism driving that party interaction is exactly the same mechanism driving a multi-million-dollar B2B software sale.
Really? The exact same?
It is. We are wired to feel a dopamine release when we talk about our own problems and feel heard. When you ask someone a thoughtful question, you validate their experience.
That makes total sense.
Trust is the baseline currency of any complex sale. You cannot demand trust. You build it by proving you understand the prospect's unique, specific pain. And the only pathway to understanding their pain is by being fiercely, genuinely curious about their world.
So how do we test for this Friday night party curiosity in a sterile, high-pressure interview room? A candidate is nervous. They know they're there to talk about themselves and prove their worth. How do you see if they can flip the spotlight onto someone else?
The source material outlines 2 incredibly effective tests for this. The first one begins before the formal interview even starts. It's called the lobby test.
The lobby test. Okay.
Imagine you're the hiring manager. You walk out to the reception area to greet the candidate. What happens in that 60-second walk from the lobby to your office?
Right, that awkward small talk phase.
Exactly. Do they just shake your hand and follow you in dead silence, staring at the floor? Or do they engage?
Yeah.
Do they ask about the architecture of the building? Did they research your personal background on LinkedIn the night before and ask an open-ended question about it?
Like what?
Something like, hey, I saw in your profile you spent 5 years in product development before moving to sales leadership. What was the hardest part of that transition?
Oh, that is a massive tell. If they aren't curious enough to ask a basic question to the person who literally holds their career in their hands, they are absolutely never going to be curious about a random mid-level manager they cold call on a rainy Tuesday afternoon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It exposes their default setting.
And what's the second test?
The second test occurs during the role play we discussed earlier. When you say ring, what are the very first sentences out of their mouth?
Right.
If they say, hi, I'm calling from ACME Corp. We provide state-of-the-art logistics software that saves you 20% on shipping. Do you have 5 minutes? they instantly fail.
Because it's all about them.
That is not curiosity. That is a canned pitch.
They're throwing up on the prospect before they even know if the prospect ships anything.
Right. A curious candidate starts with context, not a pitch. They open by saying, "Hi, I noticed your company recently expanded its warehouse footprint in the Midwest, and you downloaded our ebook on supply chain efficiency. What specific bottlenecks are you hitting with that new expansion?"
So good.
They use a tiny piece of data to wedge open a dialogue, and then, this is the critical part, they shut up and listen.
Right. Let the prospect talk.
The takeaway for anyone hiring is to deliberately monitor the candidate's airtime. Test if they can sustain a conversation for 5 solid minutes without defaulting to talking about themselves or their product.
Sustaining a conversation purely on inbound data is a high bar,
Yeah.
but it definitely filters out the self-centered talkers immediately.
It does.
Let's move to trait number 3. Prior success. Now, I'll admit, when I first read prior success on the scorecard, I rolled my eyes a bit.
I get that.
It just sounds painfully obvious.
Right.
Like, hey, you should hire successful people. Revolutionary stuff, right?
Right. It sounds like a cliche.
Yeah, but the way the data actually defines prior success is not what you'd think. It is not defined as hitting 110% of your quota at a rival software company. It's defined as a history of top performance or remarkable achievement in literally any field of human endeavor.
This is where the engineering mindset really forces us to question our preconceived biases about what a quote-unquote good resume looks like.
Yeah.
When Roberge looked at his top performers, the people breaking records at HubSpot, they had incredibly diverse, almost bizarre backgrounds for a tech startup.
Give me some examples.
He had a woman who was an Olympic gold medalist.
An Olympian.
Yep. He had a guy who was a first-chair cello player for the Portland Symphony. He had a former comedian who had navigated the brutal club circuit and been featured on Comedy Central.
Let's just pause and visualize that resume for a second. You are hiring for a fast-paced, cutthroat tech sales role where you have to make 60 cold calls a day.
Right.
A resume slides across your desk, and under experience, it says, first chair cello, Portland Symphony. Most traditional hiring managers wouldn't even read the second line.
They'd toss it.
They would toss it in the trash. No domain experience. No B2B background. Next. But the regression analysis said that cellist was a superstar. Why? What is the hidden mechanism connecting classical music to closing software deals?
It comes down to the psychology of grit and the neurobiology of enduring friction.
Enduring friction. Okay.
Think about what is required to become a first-chair cellist in a major symphony. It is not just talent. It requires thousands upon thousands of hours of solitary, agonizingly repetitive practice.
Oh, yeah.
It requires blistering your fingers. It requires sitting in front of ruthless conductors who tear apart your technique day after day. It requires a relentless, almost obsessive pursuit of perfection in the face of constant micro-failures.
So they have already built the mental calluses.
Precisely.
When you map that onto a sales floor, cold calling 50 strangers a day and getting hung up on 49 times seems like an absolute walk in the park compared to practicing scales for 6 hours a day for 20 years.
The psychological profile is identical. Both require a high baseline for enduring rejection and a massive capacity for delayed gratification.
And the comedian, too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about standing on a stage in front of a hostile crowd, trying out new material, and bombing.
Ugh, the worst feeling.
A heckler yells at you. You have to handle that objection natively in real time without losing your composure and win the crowd back. That is high-level salesmanship in a different wrapper.
That's a great way to put it.
You're looking for evidence of relentless dedication. If someone has a proven track record of fighting their way into the top 1% of anything, they possess the internal wiring necessary to push through the inevitable grind of sales.
The takeaway there is profound. Stop filtering resumes strictly by the title account executive. Look for a history of greatness, even if the greatness happened on a stage or a sports field.
Exactly.
Okay, trait number 4, intelligence. Now, in this framework, intelligence is not about having a high IQ on paper or being able to solve advanced calculus.
Right.
It is defined as the ability to learn complex concepts quickly and communicate them simply. But I have to play devil's advocate here. Let's look at a high-volume sales job. Isn't raw work ethic, just brute force grinding, more important than intellectual horsepower?
That's a common debate.
Right, because if I have to choose between a brilliant genius who overthinks everything and makes 10 calls a day and an average intellect who just puts their head down and dials the phone 100 times a day, I'm taking the 100 calls, right? It's a numbers game.
It is a totally valid pushback, And the answer depends entirely on the specific microeconomics of your market.
What do you mean?
If you're selling a heavily commoditized product, let's say you're selling printer paper or, basic janitorial supplies to office buildings.
Okay.
The buyer already knows exactly what printer paper is. They know exactly how it works. They just want the lowest price per ream.
Right. It's simple.
In that specific environment, you are absolutely right. Work ethic trumps intelligence. You don't need to be a philosopher to sell paper. You just need to knock on more doors than the next guy.
But if the terrain is a maze instead of a straight track, if I'm selling something complex,
Then intelligence is the primary bottleneck to revenue. Think about the historical context of the source material. Roberge was scaling HubSpot in 2007 and 2008.
right.
They were selling a concept called inbound marketing software. At that time, nobody outside of a few tech hubs even knew what inbound marketing meant.
Facebook was barely out of colleges.
Exactly. The industry was mutating every 6 months. The salespeople couldn't just memorize a script. They had to learn entirely new, highly technical concepts. Search engine optimization, blogging algorithms, lead nurturing workflows.
Heavy stuff.
Very heavy. And then they had to synthesize those dense concepts and explain them to a 50-year-old traditional marketing executive in a way that sounded simple, made logical sense, and drove a 5-figure purchase.
Yeah, if the salesperson doesn't truly deeply understand the complex idea themselves, they can't possibly simplify it for the buyer. It will just sound like a wall of confusing jargon, and confused buyers do not buy.
So the definition of intelligence here is really about the velocity of learning.
Velocity of learning, exactly.
How do we test for that without sitting a candidate down in a sterile room with a number 2 pencil and making them take a literal standardized IQ test?
Well, you turn the interview process itself into a microcosm of your training program.
How does that work?
You don't test what they already know. You test how fast their brain processes new, unfamiliar information. The tactic here is the homework test.
The homework test.
Yeah. After the very first initial phone screen, if you like the candidate, you give them an assignment. You send them dense reading material on a complex concept related to your industry.
Okay.
In HubSpot's case, it might be a 2,000-word article on how search engine optimization algorithms index websites. You tell them, I need you to read and understand this before our in-person interview on Thursday.
And then when Thursday rolls around, you give them a quiz?
No, because a written quiz only tests rote memorization. You need to test applied intelligence.
During the role play, you act as a prospect who is deeply confused about SEO. You say, look, I just don't understand how adding words to my blog makes me show up on Google. It sounds like magic.
That's a very realistic customer objection.
It is. And then you see if the candidate can synthesize the dense article they read 2 days ago and explain the mechanism to you simply, using analogies, without getting bogged down in the technical weeds.
That is brilliant.
If they can absorb heavy material on a Tuesday and teach it effectively on a Thursday, they have the cognitive horsepower required to survive in a complex market.
It's a test of translation. Can you translate dense data into actionable insight? Brilliant.
Yeah.
That brings us to the fifth and final trait on the scorecard: work ethic. Proactively pursuing the company mission with high energy and daily activity. Now, earlier you mentioned that self-reporting is useless for coachability. I imagine work ethic is even worse.
Oh, it's the absolute work.
Right. Nobody's ever walked into a job interview, sat down and said, honestly, I'm more of a solid 10:30 a.m. to 3:0 p.m. kind of worker. I like a long lunch.
Everyone lies about how hard they work.
So how do you figure it out?
It is notoriously the hardest trait to accurately evaluate in a 60-minute interview window. When a candidate comes into an interview, they're wearing their best suit, they drank 2 cups of coffee, and they're bringing their absolute peak energy.
It's a performance.
It is a performance. You cannot ask them if they work hard.
Yeah.
You have to look past the performance and examine the behavioral exhaust they leave behind during the entire multi-week recruitment process.
I love that phrase, behavioral exhaust. What does the exhaust of a high work ethic person actually look like in the real world?
Well, it starts with basic observation of their operational tempo.
Okay.
How fast do they return your emails?
Okay, speed.
Yeah. If you send them a request for 3 professional references at 4:00 p.m. on a Tuesday, do you get an email back at 4:15 p.m. with the list perfectly formatted? Or do they ghost you for 3 days and blame it on their busy schedule? Do they push the pace of the interview process? Are they proactively following up, asking what the next step is, demonstrating a tangible hunger for the role? Or are you, as the hiring manager, constantly having to drag them across the finish line? Speed of execution is the purest indicator of effort.
The speed of execution is the exhaust. But what about verifying their past? Surely we have to call their old bosses. Doesn't the traditional reference check solve the work ethic question?
Traditional reference checks are fundamentally broken because of social dynamics and corporate liability.
What do you mean?
If you call a former manager and ask, "Did Sarah work hard?" the manager will almost universally say, "Oh yeah, Sarah was a great worker."
Because nobody wants to be the bad guy.
Exactly. It's basic human nature. They don't want to maliciously sabotage someone's career, and in many corporate environments, HR strictly forbids managers from saying anything negative out of fear of a defamation lawsuit.
Right, they just confirm the dates of employment and that's it.
Right. They are incentivized to lie to you, or at least gloss over the truth. You have to bypass that social friction. You have to use a specific trick.
The reference check trick. I was waiting for this. How do we break the social script of a reference check?
When you get the former manager on the phone, you do not ask any binary yes or no questions. You take the choice away from them.
Okay.
You say, "I am evaluating Sarah on 4 specific traits for this role: coachability, curiosity, intelligence, and work ethic. Based on the 2 years you spent managing her, I need you to force rank those 4 traits from her strongest to her weakest."
Oh, that is absolutely ruthless, but it is brilliant. You trap them into honesty.
You really do.
Because no matter how much they love Sarah, mathematically, they have to put something in the number 4 spot.
Exactly the point. They are forced to reveal a weakness. If they put work ethic in the 4th slot, you don't aggressively attack it. You calmly follow up.
Like how?
You say, "That is really interesting. She seems great, but why did work ethic rank at the bottom of the list for you?"
And then they justify it.
Yes. The reference will usually try to soften the blow to protect Sarah. They'll say something like, "Well, don't get me wrong, she gets her work done, but she is just so incredibly smart and learns so fast, she didn't need to put in the grueling 10-hour days that the rest of the team did to hit her numbers. She's efficient."
Boom. The truth slips out, disguised as a compliment. She doesn't actually have a high work ethic. She coasts on her raw intelligence.
Exactly.
Which, to be fair, might have been perfectly fine at her old corporate job where the goals were low. But if you're hiring for a startup trying to scale to $100 million, you need people grinding. Coasting on intelligence kills scaling companies.
Precisely. You uncover the reality of their output. You also pair this trick with deep behavioral questioning during the actual interview.
What kind of questions?
Instead of asking, "Are you a hard worker?" you ask a process question. You say, "Walk me through your typical Tuesday at your last job, hour by hour. What were your non-negotiable, must-do activities every single day?"
Oh, that's good.
You are listening for the cadence, the sheer volume of activity, and the architectural structure of their day.
Yeah.
High work ethic people don't just work hard. They have highly structured, high-volume routines that they can articulate to you in granular, extreme detail.
Let's take a deep breath because we have just built the ultimate engineered scorecard.
Oh, yeah.
We have the 5 non-negotiable traits: coachability, curiosity, prior success, intelligence, and work ethic. We have the rigorous behavioral tests designed to uncover them. We know how to run the role plays. We know how to check the exhaust. We know how to break the reference check.
The whole system.
Right. We are finally ready to build an unstoppable army of modern sales consultants. So as a manager, I take this pristine profile, I write up a beautiful job description, I post it on LinkedIn, Indeed monster, and I just sit back and wait for the Olympian cello players to start flooding my inbox.
And if you do that, you will yield absolutely 0 top performers.
Wait, 0? Are you kidding me? We just spent all this time building the perfect net. Why won't it catch any fish?
Because you are casting your net in a dead sea.
Oh.
This is the harsh sourcing reality that breaks most hiring managers. Truly great salespeople, the top 1%, they never have to apply for a job. Ever.
Because they're already employed.
They are what the industry calls passive candidates. Walk through the logic. If someone is truly a top-tier performer, they are crushing their quota every month. They are taking home massive commission checks.
Yeah, they're making bank.
Their current boss absolutely adores them and treats them like royalty to keep them happy. And more importantly, their old bosses love them.
Right. The diaspora of old managers who got promoted and moved on to other tech companies in the city.
Exactly. A truly elite salesperson's phone rings once a quarter with a former VP of sales calling them up.
Pitching them.
Yep. The old boss says, "Hey, I just took over as the chief revenue officer at this hot new AI startup. We just got Series B funding." The comp plan is insane. The product practically sells itself. Let me take you to a steak dinner on Thursday and pitch you on bringing your talents to my new team.
So they never even need to look.
Never. Top performers are in a constant state of being actively recruited by people who already trust them. They never need to update their resume. They haven't looked at a job board in 5 years.
Right.
If someone is desperately blasting their resume to 50 random companies on Sofala, indeed, you have to ask yourself a very uncomfortable question. Why?
Why isn't anyone fighting to keep them? Why isn't their old boss trying to poach them? If nobody who knows their work wants them, why should I?
Exactly.
Okay, so if the A players aren't browsing the job boards, how on earth do I find them? Do I just capitulate and hire an expensive outside recruiting agency to headhunt passive talent for me?
The source material argues very strongly against relying primarily on outside agencies.
Really? Why?
The structural issue with outside recruiters is a matter of misaligned incentives. They work on commission, usually a percentage of the first year's salary, and they represent dozens of different companies simultaneously.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If an outside recruiter miraculously finds an absolute once-in-a-generation superstar, are they going to pitch your obscure early-stage risky startup to that candidate first?
Probably not.
No, they're going to pitch the massive publicly traded enterprise company that pays the recruiter a higher placement fee and is a much easier brand for the candidate to trust.
They're going to take the path of least resistance to the biggest commission check. It's just rational economics. I mean, I can't blame them, but it means I'm getting their second or third tier candidates.
Right. The strategic solution is that you have to build a world-class recruiting agency within your own company. You have to build the internal muscle to hunt passive talent yourself.
Okay, how do we do that?
The framework provides 3 main ways to do this. First, as the hiring manager, you have to become a surgical LinkedIn sleuth.
The sleuth.
Yes, you do not wait for applications. You go out and find the profiles of people who fit your exact hyper-specific criteria.
How specific are we getting with this sleuthing? Are we just searching for account executive in our city?
Far more specific. You filter by your zip code, yes.
Yeah.
You filter by specific job titles to find people already in the trenches. You filter by university or specific demanding majors if you're looking for those proxy indicators of high intelligence.
Right.
But the real magic happens when you filter by company.
Ah, we are systematically poaching from our neighbors.
It is highly strategic sourcing. Over time, you begin to identify local companies in your area that are famous for having incredible, rigorous sales training programs.
Okay.
But maybe you read in the news that those companies just got acquired by a private equity firm and the culture is going downhill, or they recently capped their commissions.
So they're vulnerable.
Exactly. You run a search for people who have been at those specific high-performing companies for 3 or 4 years. That longevity proves they survive a grueling environment and learn the skills.
And then you just message them.
You bypass the job board entirely and send them direct message. Hey, I have massive respect for the sales team over at Company X. We're building something similar here, but with a more modern approach and uncapped upside. I'd love to buy you a coffee next week just to network.
It's a soft pitch. You're treating recruiting exactly like a sales funnel. You are prospecting for talent the way you want them to prospect for revenue.
Recruiting is sales. The product is just your company's career trajectory.
I love that.
But the most powerful sourcing technique, and arguably the most brilliant tactical psychological nugget in this entire chapter, is something called the forced referral.
The forced referral. Honestly, it sounds like an advanced interrogation technique. What does that mean?
It is a method designed to overcome a very specific universal psychological friction. Usually when a company needs to hire, the HR department sends out a mass generic email to the whole staff.
Right. Hey, team, we're hiring. If you know anyone good, let us know. We're offering a $2,000 referral bonus.
And what is the result 99% of the time?
Crickets. Complete silence. Nobody replies, even with the money on the table.
Because of cognitive load. When you ask a human being, who do you know? Their brain freezes. It's just too broad a query. It relies on recall memory, which requires the brain to search a massive unstructured database, every person they have ever met in their professional life with no specific anchor.
And people are busy.
Exactly. They simply cannot access that information off the top of their head while they're trying to eat lunch and answer 50 urgent client emails. The cognitive friction is too high, so they just delete the email.
So how do you force it? How do you bypass the recall memory problem?
You shift from recall memory to recognition memory. You sit down with one of your current top performers. You say, hey, let's grab a coffee in the break room for 20 minutes.
Okay.
You open up your laptop, you log into LinkedIn, and you pull up their personal network connections. You filter their 1,000 connections by the keyword sales in your specific city.
Oh.
You then literally turn the laptop around, slide it across the table to them, and say, look at this specific list of 150 local salespeople you are already connected to. I want you to scroll through and point out the absolute best 3 reps on this screen.
Oh, that is psychological genius. You remove the recall friction entirely. They don't have to rack their brains to remember names. They just have to recognize faces as they scroll.
Exactly. Recognition memory is nearly instantaneous. And because top salespeople are naturally hyper-competitive and highly opinionated about their peers, they will immediately start categorizing the list out loud.
I can totally see that.
They'll say, oh, John. No, don't hire John. John is lazy. Sarah. Sarah is an absolute killer. She crushed her quota every quarter we worked together at our last job. David is pretty smart, but he's terrible at prospecting.
That's amazing.
In under 10 minutes, your top performer has just handed you a highly vetted, aggressively curated list of proven A players.
Okay, so you have the names. You have Sarah and David. Do you just send them a cold message on LinkedIn saying, hey, your friend told me you were good, want a job?
No, you leverage the existing trust. You tell your top performer, great, I want to meet Sarah. I need you to introduce us. Just shoot her a casual text or an email right now. Say that you love working here, the company's growing fast, and you think she should grab a coffee with me just to hear what we are doing.
That is so much more effective.
The response rate on a warm personal introduction from a highly respected former peer is astronomically higher than a cold, generic message from an unknown corporate recruiter.
So what does this all mean? If we take a step back and look at the entire intellectual journey we just went on over the last hour, scaling a business, building a world-class revenue team, it isn't some mysterious innate art form.
No, not at all.
It's not about the hiring manager having a magical gut instinct for reading people. It is a highly predictable, repeatable, and scalable engineering process.
That is the soul of this chapter, and frankly, the soul of modern business scaling. You have to strip the messy emotion, the personal biases, and the guesswork out of the human equation. You define the exact traits your specific buyer context demands. In this case, coachability, curiosity, prior success, intelligence, and work ethic.
The blueprint.
Yes. You design rigorous, observable, psychological, and behavioral tests for every single one of those traits, like the role play and the reference check trick. And finally, you go out and actively hunt the passive, top-tier talent that possesses those traits, using surgical sourcing methods like the forced referral.
It's a complete system.
When you lock those pieces into place, you stop hoping for good hires. You guarantee a higher caliber of talent. You build a machine that consistently outputs excellence.
But here's the ultimate cliffhanger for you. Let's say you do all of this perfectly. You engineer the ideal hiring formula. You hunt down and hire these brilliant, fiercely curious, highly coachable people who are cello players and Olympians.
You've got the dream team.
Right. You bring these unicorns into your company. How do you train them without accidentally destroying the very unique superpowers that made you hire them in the first place?
It's a huge risk.
Because the traditional way we train salespeople, the classic ride-along shadow method where a rookie just watches a veteran for a month, is actually a massive, structurally disastrous mistake.
It absolutely is.
We're going to tackle exactly why that is and how to engineer the perfect metric-driven training matrix in our next deep dive. Until then, the next time you find yourself interviewing a candidate or even just having a conversation at a Friday night dinner party, ask yourself, are they mindlessly pitching me an X-ray? Or are they acting like a master doctor, asking the right questions and diagnosing the real problem?
What if I told you that the perfect candidate for your next open role is someone who isn't even looking for a job?
Right.
And what if the person who is, actively sending you their resume, the one eagerly waiting by the phone for your call, is actually the exact person you should systematically avoid?
It's a wild thought, right? Because it completely shatters the fundamental premise of how I mean, probably 99% of companies operate.
Yeah.
We're conditioned from, day one of business school to believe that hiring is this marketplace of active participants. You put up a sign, you broadcast your need, and you just wait for the market to respond.
Which feels logical, honestly.
It does, but when you analyze the data, particularly in high-stakes, high-revenue environments, that traditional inbound approach isn't just inefficient. It is actively selecting for mediocrity.
So in this deep dive, we're exploring the precise mechanical blueprint for finding and securing top-tier talent. We're lifting the hood on a specific playbook, which is derived from a company's documented journey from $0 to $100 million in revenue. And this playbook completely re-engineers the hiring process. This is for anyone building a business, managing a team, or, just trying to scale. Because relying on job boards and inbound applications means you're effectively outsourcing your most critical growth engine to chance.
And true growth requires hunting the talent that isn't asking to be found.
Right.
That's our mission today. We're going to deconstruct the traditional luck-based hiring apparatus and basically replace it with a predictable, engineered formula. We're moving from a world of hope to a world of math and proactive hunting.
I love that. So let's start at the point of maximum frustration, which is usually where most founders and hiring managers find themselves right before they realize the whole system is broken.
Oh yeah, the classic hiring trap.
Right. You're tasked with scaling a team from scratch. So you do what the standard corporate playbook dictates, which is, you cast a massive net, you buy premium placements on Indeed, LinkedIn, Monster, maybe some niche industry boards.
You spend thousands of dollars doing this, by the way.
Exactly. And you receive hundreds of applications. You spend your weekends just wading through resumes. You block out your calendar for, 50 phone screens. You bring a dozen people into the office for these extensive multi-round interviews.
And it's exhausting.
It's so exhausting. And the net result of all that effort is, very often, absolutely zero hires. Or worse, a bad hire.
It's an incredibly common scenario, and honestly, it represents a staggering misallocation of executive time. But the failure isn't really a reflection of the manager's interviewing skills. No, it's a fundamental flaw in the sourcing pool itself. The realization that drives this entire $100 million playbook is that truly elite performers never have to apply for a job.
Never.
They are what we call passive candidates.
I think about this kind of like the high-end real estate market.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. If you're looking for a generational property, like a flawless architectural masterpiece in the perfect neighborhood, you are almost never going to find it sitting on the public MLS listings.
No, absolutely not.
The best houses are sold through whisper networks. The top brokers already know who wants to buy and who might quietly entertain an offer. The transaction is fully executed before a for sale sign ever hits the front lawn.
That's exactly it.
If you're exclusively shopping on the public boards, you're fundamentally picking through the inventory that the whisper network passed over.
That is the perfect mechanism to understand this. Now, apply that whisper network to human capital. Think about the operational reality of a top-tier salesperson or an elite engineer for that matter.
Right.
If they're absolutely crushing their objectives, generating massive revenue, solving complex problems, what is their daily environment actually like?
They're probably doing pretty well.
They're doing incredibly well. They're highly compensated. Their management team likely treats them incredibly well, and they're probably being groomed for leadership. Crucially, though, their former managers and colleagues who have moved on to other companies are constantly trying to poach them. They're getting taken to dinners, invited to ball games, and receiving those quiet texts asking, are you ready to make a move yet?
Right. They aren't spending their Sunday evenings tweaking the formatting on their cover letter and scrolling through job portals. They simply don't have the time. And, they don't have the incentive.
Exactly. Therefore, by sheer mathematical definition, the pool of people who are actively flooding your inbox with resumes is skewed.
Skewed in a bad way.
Very bad. It disproportionately consists of individuals who are unhappy, underperforming, culturally misaligned at their current firm, or working for a company that's going under.
Are there exceptions?
Of course there are exceptions. Life events happen. People relocate for family. But if you're building a scalable, predictable hiring engine, you really can't build it on the hope of catching statistical anomalies.
That makes sense.
If you want the absolute best talent in the market, you must accept that the best talent is already happily employed elsewhere. And they are completely ignoring your job postings.
So if I'm a founder or a department head listening to this, the immediate takeaway is a massive pivot in resource allocation. You have to kill the inbound reactive mindset.
You have to.
You're no longer sifting, you're hunting. But that brings us to a major logistical wall, doesn't it? If the talent is passive, how do we actually get to them?
Right.
The default corporate reflex here is to just, throw money at the problem and hire an external recruiting agency.
And many companies do exactly that. They engage 5 or 6 different external search firms, promising them like 15 to 25% of the candidate's first-year base salary as a bounty.
Which is a huge chunk of change.
It's massive. But if we analyze the underlying economics of external recruiting, we quickly see why it rarely yields the team-building results a growing company actually needs.
Because I imagine the external recruiter is essentially playing a game of arbitrage. They have access to talent, sure, but their financial incentives are completely misaligned with the long-term health of my specific company.
Precisely. Let's look at the mechanics of it. An external agency recruiter is, at their core, a highly aggressive salesperson.
Right.
They're excellent at cold calling, networking, and unearthing those passive candidates we just talked about. But they do not work exclusively for you. Let's say an external recruiter unearths a true unicorn, a brilliant, adaptable, high-performing candidate.
Okay.
That recruiter has a portfolio of client companies looking for that exact profile.
And if I'm a scrappy startup offering a $90,000 base salary, but a massive enterprise software company down the street is offering $150,000, I'm never even going to see that candidate's resume, am I?
You won't even know they exist. A rational, commission-driven external recruiter is going to send their absolute best talent to the client that guarantees the highest placement fee and the easiest close.
Wow.
You're getting their B-tier candidates or the candidates that the higher-paying enterprise firms already passed on. They have split loyalties, and their loyalty ultimately lies with their own commission structure, not your company's growth trajectory.
Okay, so if we rule out external agencies because of misaligned incentives, the obvious alternative is bringing it in-house. We hire a corporate HR recruiter, someone who, sits in our office, understands our culture, and is 100% dedicated to our company.
But traditional corporate recruiting presents the exact opposite vulnerability.
How so?
The typical internal corporate recruiter operates fundamentally as an administrator. They're usually salaried employees, perhaps with a small annual bonus tied to generic company performance.
Right.
They excel at writing job descriptions, managing applicant tracking systems, coordinating complex interview schedules, ensuring compliance.
But they are hunters?
They are not hunters. They are farmers waiting for the crops to grow. They are completely uncomfortable with the aggressive, outbound, cold calling required to rip a highly compensated, happy employee out of a competitor's organization.
Yeah, that's an entirely different skill set.
Yeah, it is. In fact, when tasked with finding top passive talent, what does the traditional internal recruiter usually do? They turn around and outsource the search to the external agencies we just disqualified.
Wait. So if option A is a mercenary who sells your best candidate to the highest bidder, and option B is an administrator who just waits for the phone to ring, we're completely stuck.
Exactly.
Every board member and VC is going to pressure a founder to hire fast, but both standard vehicles for hiring are fundamentally broken.
Yeah.
What is the actual structural solution here?
The breakthrough in this playbook, and it's a massive paradigm shift for organizational design, is to build a recruiting agency within the walls of your own corporation.
Okay.
You create what's called an internal agency model.
Let's break down the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
What does an internal agency actually look like on an org chart, and how does it function differently than standard HR?
It starts with who you hire. You don't hire someone with a traditional HR background. You go out and you poach a hungry, relentless, top-performing recruiter from an external agency.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You bring that aggressive hunter mentality in-house. But, and this is where companies usually fail when they try this, you cannot just drop them into a standard corporate HR role and expect them to maintain their edge. You have to preserve the agency environment.
But wait, if I'm the VP of HR, I'm shutting this down immediately.
Why?
Because the entire reason agency recruiters hustle so hard is because they have those massive, uncapped commission checks dangling in front of them. If you bring an aggressive, commission-driven headhunter into a standard corporate HR department, aren't they going to culturally clash with everyone else?
They absolutely will.
And if you take away their massive agency commissions, won't they just get comfortable, slow down, and turn into the exact administrative farmer we are trying to avoid?
That is the exact friction point, and it's why the compensation engineering here is so brilliant. You don't put them on standard corporate HR pay bands. You pay them like an agency recruiter.
Really?
Yes. You offer a lower base salary to keep them hungry, but you pair it with significant, highly structured performance bonuses.
How is the bonus structured? Because, I mean, if you just pay them for putting a warm body in a chair, they're going to force bad fits into your company just to hit their numbers.
Exactly. If the bonus is tied purely to fill rate, you destroy your culture. Instead, the internal agency model ties the recruiter's financial success to the longevity and performance of the hire.
Oh, that's clever.
Let's look at the math. If an agency recruiter brings in a candidate, they don't get their full bonus on day one. They might get a small fraction upon signing, but the real payout comes at month 6 and month 12 and is explicitly contingent on that new hire hitting their performance targets or quotas.
That is fascinating. You are effectively making the recruiter an equity partner in the success of the employee.
You're completely aligning their financial reality with the long-term health of your company. If they aggressively sell a candidate who washes out after 90 days because it was a bad cultural fit, the recruiter's compensation takes a massive hit.
Yeah, they feel the pain of a bad hire directly.
They learn very quickly that they cannot just hunt. They have to hunt with precision. And to guarantee they do this work themselves, the playbook dictates a hard rule. This internal team is strictly prohibited from utilizing any outside agencies.
You burn the boats, you cut off their safety net, so they have literally no choice but to rely on their own outbound sourcing.
Exactly.
And because they only have one client, your company, when they find that unicorn candidate, there is no arbitrage. They're pitching your vision, your equity, and your culture exclusively.
And once you have this internal hunter fully aligned, you can start managing the recruiting process the exact same way a VP of sales manages a revenue pipeline. It becomes mathematically predictable.
So you track the funnel.
You track the funnel. How many passive candidates did the recruiter identify this week? How many personalized outreach messages were sent? How many of those converted into introductory phone screens?
Right.
How many phone screens resulted in a formal interview with a hiring manager? And finally, what is the close rate on those interviews?
So if you know you need to hire 4 people next quarter, and you know your historical conversion rates from top of funnel to signed offer, you can look your internal recruiter in the eye and say, to hit our goals, you need to identify and reach out to exactly 400 passive candidates this month.
It removes all the emotion and guesswork. It turns talent acquisition into a predictable engineering equation.
That makes total sense.
Now, you might be thinking, this sounds great, but I'm a startup founder. I don't have the budget to hire a full-time, dedicated internal headhunter yet.
Right. The playbook actually notes that the author didn't get the budget to hire his first internal recruiter until he already had about 10 frontline employees on staff. Prior to that, the founders and the early managers have to be the ones doing the hunting.
Which means we need to transition from the structural theory to the actual tactical playbook. How do you, as a manager with zero recruiting background, systematically identify and reach out to talent that is actively ignoring you?
And the primary battlefield for this is LinkedIn. And what I love about this playbook is that it relies almost entirely on the free, basic functionality of the platform.
You really don't need a $10,000 enterprise recruiter license to execute this.
No, you don't. But you do need to understand how to manipulate the search filters, because simply typing account executive into the search bar is going to yield like 500,000 useless results.
You have to layer your filters to create a highly curated, hyper-targeted list. Let's walk through the mechanics of the search.
Okay, let's do it.
First, and most obviously, is geography. You filter by local zip codes. You want candidates who are already in your market to avoid the friction, expense, and delay of corporate relocations.
Makes sense.
Second, you filter by job title to ensure they are actually operating in the specific capacity you need.
But then the playbook introduces a filter that is slightly controversial, or at least highly specific to the environment they were building in. They filtered by the quality of the undergraduate institution.
Yes. This is a crucial piece of the methodology. In this specific company's context, which involved selling a highly complex, disruptive software product, they conducted internal data analysis on their early successful hires and found that raw cognitive intelligence was a massive predictor of success.
Even more than prior sales experience.
Much more so than prior industry experience. So they used the academic rigor of the candidate's university as a proxy for the intelligence and rapid learning capability they required.
Though it's important to note the nuance here. They specifically call out the danger of only targeting ultra-elite Ivy League graduates.
Absolutely. If you only hire graduates from Harvard or Stanford for a frontline, grueling operational role, you introduce a massive retention risk.
Because they get bored.
Because those candidates are incredibly smart, but they often have sky-high expectations for rapid career progression. If you can't promote them into management within 9 months, they will get bored, feel underutilized, and leave.
Ah, I see.
The sweet spot, according to the playbook, often lies in the second-tier schools institutions known for strong academics and a strong work ethic, producing graduates who are brilliant but also willing to grind it out in the trenches for a few years to build a foundation.
That makes a lot of sense. So you have your geographic filter, your role filter, and your baseline intelligence proxy. But the next filter is where the real competitive intelligence comes in. You start targeting specific local companies.
As you operate in any business ecosystem, whether it's software in Boston, finance in New York, or manufacturing in the Midwest, you quickly learn which companies have elite training programs and ruthless performance cultures.
The talent academies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You identify the companies that act as talent academies. You want to poach the people who survived their crucible.
But how do you know if the candidate actually survived the crucible or if they're just, barely hanging on? Because let's be honest, anyone can write achieved 150% to quota or top performer on their LinkedIn profile. It is the easiest metric in the world to fabricate, and hiring managers fall for it all the time.
Which is why you ignore the self-reported metrics entirely.
Really? Ignore them completely.
You look for the one indicator on a resume that is nearly impossible to fake: longevity.
Okay, explain that.
Let's break down the operational reality of a high-performance sales culture. If a company is truly elite, they have zero tolerance for dead weight. If they hire a terrible salesperson, that person is usually put on a performance improvement plan and managed out within 8 to 12 months.
Okay.
A mediocre salesperson, someone who does just enough to avoid getting fired but isn't really moving the needle, might survive for 18 to 24 months before the management team loses patience.
So if you are looking at the profile of someone who has been at an elite, demanding organization for 3, 4, or even 5 years.
That is your unicorn. A ruthless performance culture simply does not subsidize mediocrity for half a decade. If they have survived there for 4 years, they are almost certainly a top-tier performer who is consistently delivering value.
Okay, so we've applied the filters. We have our list of maybe 20 local, smart, battle-tested candidates who have been crushing it at a competitor for 4 years. Now comes the moment of truth. You have to initiate contact.
And remember, they are not looking for a job.
Right. If you send them a standard recruiter message like, "Hi, I have an exciting opportunity. Are you free for a quick chat?" They're going to archive it without reading past the first line.
They see 10 of those messages a week. It is white noise. You need a pattern interruption. And the cold email template provided in this playbook is a masterclass in psychological subtlety.
I call this the Jedi mind trick of recruiting. Let's really dissect the exact mechanics of this email, starting before they even open it. The subject line.
It's so good.
It doesn't say job opportunity or connecting. It is incredibly minimalist. It is just the name of their current employer, a /, and the name of their college. So, employer college, for example, Oracle Penn State.
Put yourself in the psychological state of the passive candidate here. You are scanning your inbox on a Tuesday afternoon. You're trained to ignore sales pitches and recruiter spam. But you see a subject line containing your current company and your alma mater from someone you don't know.
Your brain has to pause.
Your brain immediately tries to categorize it. Is this an alumni networking request? Is it a client? It is highly personalized, but completely devoid of traditional solicitation language. The open rate on a subject line like that is astronomically high because it demands curiosity.
Okay, so you've bypassed their initial defense mechanism and they open the email. The body is only 3 sentences long.
Keep it short.
The first sentence congrats on all your success.
Immediate ego gratification. You're acknowledging their status as a top performer. You are validating the hard work they've put in over those 4 years of longevity we just filtered for.
Second sentence. I run the sales team over here at your company. Our current team can't keep up with the inbound lead flow, so we are expanding the team, and your background is very similar to those of our current top performers.
This is a dense piece of psychological positioning.
It really is.
First, I run the team establishes authority. You aren't an HR screener, you are the decision maker. Second, we can't keep up with the lead flow is a massive dog whistle to any salesperson.
Oh, huge.
It implies a target-rich environment, momentum, and easy money. And third, explicitly comparing their background to your top performers is another layer of deep validation. You are telling them they belong in an elite group.
But the final sentence is the actual Jedi mind trick. It is the hinge upon which the entire strategy rests. You do not ask them if they want to interview. You ask, are there any folks in your network who are in the job market and have a background similar to yours?
By asking for an indirect referral, you completely disarm their defensive shields.
Right, because when you pitch someone a job directly, their brain instantly starts generating friction, right? I don't want to update my resume, my commute is fine, I like my current boss, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't.
Exactly. But when you ask for a referral, there is no pressure. The ask is non-confrontational and guilt-free.
It feels like you're just asking for a quick professional favor. But subconsciously, it is planting a massive seed of FOMO fear of missing out.
Precisely. They sit back in their chair and think, wait a minute. This executive thinks I have the exact profile of a top performer at a fast-growing, highly lucrative company. Why are they asking for my friends? Am I missing out on a life-changing opportunity?
You force them to evaluate the opportunity without ever making them feel like they're being sold to.
And the beauty of this is the worst-case scenario. Even if they are genuinely 100% happy and not going to leave their current role, you have flattered them, treated them with respect, and they very well might forward your email to a brilliant colleague who is quietly looking to leave.
It's an asymmetric bet. You win either way.
And if they don't reply to the email, the playbook dictates a very specific follow-up. You call them the next day.
Oh, you actually call them.
Because if they are in sales, they are professionally obligated to answer their phone. You reference the email, reiterate the indirect ask, and often that live conversation is where they finally say, actually, tell me a little more about this role for myself.
It is a phenomenal outbound motion. But what if we want to leverage the people who are already inside our building? Let's talk about referrals.
Yeah, internal referrals are usually terrible.
Most companies are so bad at generating internal referrals. They send out a generic company-wide email saying, we have open roles. If you know anyone, let HR know there's a $2,000 bonus. And then just crickets.
Because the standard referral program fundamentally misunderstands human behavior. You are asking your employees to do heavy cognitive lifting.
Yeah.
When they read that mass email, you are asking them to mentally pause their day, scan their entire professional history, evaluate every former colleague against the vague requirements of your job description, and then proactively initiate a potentially awkward conversation.
It is way too much friction. People are inherently lazy when it comes to tasks outside their core job description.
Which brings us to the most powerful tactical maneuver in the entire playbook, the forced referral. This is how you systematically extract the network value from your existing team.
Walk us through the exact mechanics of a forced referral session.
You don't send a mass email. You wait until a new hire has been in their seat for about 45 to 60 days.
Why that time frame?
At this point, they're fully onboarded, they understand the culture, and crucially, they are happy and excited about their decision to join your company. You go to their desk and you say, I'm putting a 20-minute meeting on your calendar for tomorrow afternoon to talk about team growth.
Which usually terrifies a new hire, by the way. They think they're in trouble.
Right, but you reassure them it's positive. That night, you go to that new hire's LinkedIn profile. You pull up their connections. Let's say they have 300 connections. You meticulously comb through every single one, applying the exact same filters we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Geography, role, intelligence proxy, longevity at elite companies. You spend an hour doing this, and you identify 15 to 20 people in their network who look like absolute rock stars.
And then the next day, you walk into that 20-minute calendar meeting.
You sit down, you slide a printed piece of paper across the table with those 20 specific names on it, and you ask one highly focused question. Which of these 20 people are the absolute best at what they do?
It's brilliant because you have completely inverted the cognitive load. You did 99% of the heavy lifting. The employee doesn't have to generate a list from a blank slate. They just have to react to the data you provided.
Exactly. And the psychological dynamic in that room completely shifts. They look at the list, and because you've done the research, they're usually impressed.
Right.
They'll point to the first name and say, Sarah, absolutely incredible. I would hire her in a heartbeat. I'll introduce you today. They point to the next name. Dave is smart, but he's a political nightmare. Stay away. They point to the third. Mike is a genius, but he just got massive equity at his current firm. You'll never pry him away.
In 20 minutes, you get granular, unvarnished intelligence on 20 passive candidates, and you get warm introductions to the top 3.
It guarantees a high-quality conversation about specific talent. And the broader application of this mechanism is really profound. Whether you are a founder looking for engineering talent, a consultant looking for client introductions, or a nonprofit director looking for donors, never ask your network an open-ended question.
Do the research yourself.
Do the research yourself and bring them specific names to react to. It increases your conversion rate by orders of magnitude.
Now, there is one more tactical sourcing maneuver detailed in the text that honestly borders on corporate espionage, and I want to touch on it because it highlights the sheer aggression required to win at talent acquisition.
The talent pool research.
Yes, the playbook calls it talent pool research, but it essentially involves conducting interviews purely for competitive intelligence.
This is a highly strategic deployment of a manager's time. When you are sourcing, you will inevitably come across candidates who work at your target competitor companies, but whose individual resumes don't look particularly strong.
Right.
The traditional advice is to ignore them. The engineered playbook says, bring them in for an interview anyway.
You bring them in knowing you aren't going to hire them.
You aren't interviewing the candidate, you are interviewing their employer through the proxy of the candidate. If you are operating in a highly competitive ecosystem, you need perfect situational awareness of the landscape.
So what are you actually asking them in this interview?
You disguise competitive intelligence gathering as standard interview discovery. You ask them, walk me through your compensation structure. What is the base to commission ratio? You ask, how are your inbound leads generated and distributed? What does your sales cycle look like? What specific CRM tools and software are you using? Has there been any recent turnover in your executive management team?
You are building a highly accurate, real-time map of your competitors' operational vulnerabilities.
And you end the interview with the most critical question of all. If I were to ask your VP of sales who the absolute best performer on your floor is, who would they name?
Oh, that's so smart.
If the person you are interviewing isn't the top rep and you already suspect they aren't, human nature dictates they will gladly deflect attention by telling you who the actual star is. Sometimes they'll make excuses. Well, John is the top rep, but that's only because he has the best territory.
So then you ask, oh, interesting, who manages that territory?
Exactly. By the end of a 45-minute conversation, you have learned exactly what compensation package you need to offer to poach their best people, you know exactly what internal frustrations to agitate, and you have the specific names of the elite performers you need to target with that indirect Jedi mind trick, cold email.
It is ruthless, but it is undeniably effective. So we've covered the structural shift away from job boards, the creation of the highly aligned internal agency model, and the tactical execution of LinkedIn sourcing, cold emails, forced referrals, and intelligence gathering.
We've built the machine.
You've built the machine, you have the pipeline, but all of this leads to a highly specific, universally terrifying moment for any business, making that very first foundational hire.
The first hire paradox. This is the moment where theory collides with reality. Your first critical hire, whether it's your first salesperson, your first lead engineer, or your first marketing director, sets the cultural DNA of the entire organization.
No pressure.
If you get it wrong, you don't just lose money, you lose months of runway, and often you lose the company. The playbook presents this dilemma as a classic business school case study, offering 4 distinct candidate profiles for the crucial role of the first sales hire.
Let's treat this like a real-world scenario. Imagine you're a startup founder. You have scraped together a seed round of funding. You have a messy early version of your product. You have 4 resumes sitting on your desk. I want to walk through each one and deeply analyze the operational reality of hiring them.
Let's lay out the candidates. Candidate number 1 is the SVP of sales.
Okay.
This is the heavy hitter. They were the senior vice president of global sales for the massive, multi-billion-dollar Fortune 1000 competitor you are actively trying to disrupt. They have 25 years of industry experience. They managed a global team of 500 reps and oversaw hundreds of millions in revenue.
Wow. All right, candidate number 2 is the number 1 salesperson, This is the elite frontline closer currently working underneath that SVP at the same massive competitor. They have 3 years of experience, but they are undeniably the best in the industry at getting a signature on a contract.
Candidate number 3 is the entrepreneur. This person recently served as the CEO and founder of their own tech startup. They ran it for 2 years before running out of capital and failing. Prior to that, they had some formal sales training at a larger corporation, but they have virtually zero direct experience selling to your specific target buyer.
And finally, candidate number 4 is the sales manager. This person is 6 months into their first management role at a mid-sized company. They were a great frontline rep, they showed leadership potential, and were promoted. Like the entrepreneur, they don't have deep, specific experience in your niche industry.
Those are your 4 options. Who are you hiring to lead your company to market?
If I'm an anxious founder with venture capitalists breathing down my neck, I am instinctively leaping across the table for candidate 1, the SVP.
It's so tempting.
Think about the risk mitigation. This person knows every executive in the industry. They have the ultimate golden Rolodex. They know the go-to-market strategy of the dominant player in the space. Doesn't hiring them save you years of trial and error?
Yeah.
You are buying their network. It feels like the safest, most obvious choice.
It is the most common, seductive, and fatal trap that founders fall into. They are blinded by the logos on the resume and the promise of the golden Rolodex. But when you apply the engineering mindset to this problem, the SVP is revealed to be the absolute worst possible choice of the 4.
Really, the worst. Walk me through the first 30 days if I hire the SVP. Why is it a disaster?
Because you have misjudged the environment the SVP requires to function.
Yeah.
They've spent the last decade in the executive suite. They are accustomed to immense infrastructure.
Okay.
When they walk into your chaotic, underfunded startup on Monday morning, their first question is going to be, where's my administrative assistant? Their second question is, where's the marketing department to build my pitch decks?
And you have to look at them and say, you are the marketing department. We don't have an assistant.
Exactly. They haven't picked up a phone to cold call a hostile prospect in 15 years. They haven't handled early-stage, brutal objections from a confused buyer since the 1990s.
Wow.
They are brilliant at managing managers and optimizing a massive existing machine. But they have completely forgotten how to survive in the jungle with nothing but a machete. They will refuse to roll up their sleeves and do the grueling, unglamorous foundational work required to get off the ground.
Okay, but what about the network, the Rolodex?
Yeah.
That has to be worth something.
The playbook ruthlessly devalues the concept of the Rolodex in the modern economy. 20 or 30 years ago, enterprise deals were driven by personal relationships, golf course handshakes, and knowing a guy who knows a guy.
Right.
Today, especially in technology, software, and complex B2B environments, the buying process has fundamentally changed. It is driven by consensus decision-making, decentralized buying committees, ROI calculations, and inbound education.
So the personal connection isn't enough.
No. A VP at a target company isn't going to buy your buggy, unproven startup software just because your SVP used to play tennis with them. You are paying a massive premium for a network that doesn't actually translate to modern revenue velocity while importing a corporate bureaucracy mindset that will suffocate your agility.
All right, the SVP is officially disqualified. Let's move to candidate 2, the number 1 salesperson. I love this profile. They are young, they're hungry, they know the exact buyer we are going after, and they are currently destroying their quota at the biggest company in our space. They know how to grind. Why not hire the racehorse?
They are certainly a better option than the SVP, but they carry a hidden vulnerability that destroys most startups. To understand why, you have to look at how they became the number 1 rep at that massive corporation.
I used to use the analogy that they are an elite race car driver, but they don't know how to build the car. But a better analogy, functionally, is that they are used to operating on a highly developed, perfectly paved interstate highway system.
Yes, the highway system is a much more accurate systemic metaphor. Think about the number 1 rep's current reality. When they joined their massive employer, they were handed a map. They were given 6 weeks of structured onboarding.
Right.
They were handed a polished, data-backed pitch deck created by a 50-person marketing team. They have massive brand recognition. When they call a prospect, the prospect already knows who the company is. They have a legal team to handle contracts and a customer success team to handle onboarding. All they have to do is drive fast in a straight line.
But in a startup, there is no highway.
In a startup, you aren't just driving. You have to survey the land, pour the concrete, pave the road, negotiate the tolls, and draw the map simultaneously, all while trying not to run out of gas.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. The number one rep is entirely dependent on an existing infrastructure that you do not possess. When they hit a wall, when the prospect says, "I've never heard of you," and your product is missing 3 key features, the number one rep won't know how to adapt the messaging because they've never had to create messaging from scratch.
They just follow the script.
They only know how to execute a pre-written playbook. And crucially, because your first hire eventually needs to lead the team, this candidate has 0 proven leadership or management capability.
So we are down to candidate 4, the new sales manager, and candidate 3, the entrepreneur whose last company failed. You mentioned the sales manager as a defensible choice.
Yes. The sales manager represents a solid B-plus decision. They are close enough to their time on the front line that they're still willing to roll up their sleeves and cold call.
Right.
But they also have just enough management experience that they can start documenting processes and building the initial scaffolding for a team. The fact that they lack specific industry knowledge is actually fine. Smart, adaptable people can learn the nuances of a new industry rapidly.
But they are not the optimal choice. The definitive counterintuitive winner of this Harvard Business School-style case study is candidate 3, the entrepreneur, the person whose last venture literally failed.
That's the one.
You have to explain the logic here. Every instinct tells a founder to hire someone with a track record of uninterrupted success. Why is a failed CEO the ultimate first hire?
To understand this, we have to expose a fundamental misunderstanding of what the actual objective of the first hire is in an early-stage company.
Let me guess the traditional mindset. The objective of the first sales hire is to generate revenue. It is literally in the title, bring in cash to extend the runway.
And that is exactly where founders get it wrong. In a true early-stage environment, the primary goal of the first sales hire is not to close revenue.
Wait, what?
The primary goal is to accelerate the company toward product-market fit.
Product market fit. Let's define that clearly. It means proving that the thing you have built is actually a painkiller, not just a vitamin. Proving that a specific group of people desperately need it, are willing to pay for it, and that your messaging accurately communicates that value.
Exactly. When you make your first hire, the uncomfortable reality is that you probably don't have true product-market fit yet. You have a hypothesis. You might think you built a tool for human resources, but it turns out the IT department is the only group that actually cares. You might be pricing it totally wrong. Your feature set might be misaligned with the market's true pain points.
So if you hire the sales manager or the number one rep, what happens when they take that flawed hypothesis to the market?
They will execute your flawed playbook perfectly. They will make 100 cold calls, they will deliver your exact pitch, they will get rejected 99 times, and they will come back to the office frustrated.
And who do they blame?
They will blame the leads, or they will blame the product, but they won't know how to fix it because their mindset is purely transactional.
But the entrepreneur operates on a different frequency.
Completely different.
Yeah.
The entrepreneur has founder instinct. When they sit on a discovery call with a prospective client, they aren't blindly trying to force a square product into a round hole just to hit a quota. They are listening analytically.
Yeah.
They have the cognitive agility to step back from 20 different failed conversations, identify the hidden patterns, and synthesize that data.
They act as a critical feedback loop between the market and the engineering team.
Precisely. They will walk into the founder's office and say, "Listen, we've been pitching this as a cost-saving compliance tool to HR directors, and they are falling asleep. But on 3 of those calls, an IT manager happened to be in the room, and when I briefly mentioned our data migration feature, their eyes lit up. We are selling the wrong feature to the wrong department. We need to pivot our entire messaging strategy to IT."
They have the ability to iterate on the value proposition in real time.
They are the only candidate profile capable of helping you find the product market fit. They act as a product developer and a market consultant who happens to be doing sales.
That's incredibly valuable.
And on top of that, because this specific candidate has a background in formal sales training before their startup, once they do help you find that fit, they possess the structural knowledge to document the new playbook and scale the methodology.
So the practical, high-level takeaway for the listener here is really profound. When you are making foundational hires at the ground floor of any initiative, you must relentlessly prioritize entrepreneurial instinct, intellectual agility, and pattern recognition over traditional metrics, like a golden Rolodex, or deep, narrow industry knowledge.
You don't need a soldier who knows how to follow orders. You need an architect who can read the terrain and design the base camp.
It forces you to completely restructure how you interview for early-stage roles. You aren't asking a candidate to, pitch you this pen.
Oh, definitely don't ask that.
Right. You are presenting them with a vague market scenario and asking them how they would determine if the market even desires a pen, what kind of ink the market prefers, and how they would iterate the design based on early rejection.
Exactly. It's about problem solving, not just closing.
If we pull the lens back and look at the entire landscape we have traversed today, from acknowledging the mathematical reality of the passive candidate paradigm, to structurally aligning an internal recruiting agency through engineered compensation, to deploying psychological Jedi mind tricks in our cold outreach, to systematically stripping the cognitive load in forced referral sessions, and finally, prioritizing the agile entrepreneur over the rigid corporate SVP. There is a single, undeniable through line connecting all of these tactics.
And what is the synthesis you draw from that?
Building a world-class, high-performing team is not a human resources function. It's a fundamental engineering problem.
That is the absolute core of the playbook. It is the application of systems thinking to human capital.
You do not put up a job ad and pray that the universe delivers a top performer to your inbox. You do not rely on luck, and you do not rely on a nebulous concept of cultural fit.
No, you don't.
Whether you are mathematically structuring a bonus payout to force a recruiter to hunt, or bypassing the noisy, desperate job boards to run surgical strikes on LinkedIn, you are systematically matching human traits and financial incentives to your exact required business context.
The overarching lesson of this $100 million journey is that elite teams are never found by accident. They are methodically manufactured.
Manufactured, I love that word.
They are built through relentless, proactive, data-driven hunting. If you want a predictable output in your revenue or your product development, you must first engineer the input of your talent.
Which is exactly how you separate the companies that plateau from the companies that achieve exponential market-defining growth. You engineer it from the ground up. Thank you for joining us on this exhaustive deep dive into the architecture of talent sourcing.
It has been a pleasure unpacking the hidden mechanics of team building.
Now, assuming you have executed this playbook perfectly, you have bypassed the job boards, you have run the forced referrals, and you have successfully hunted down and hired that perfect, highly adaptable entrepreneurial talent. But what comes next?
The real work begins.
How do you actually train an entrepreneur? More importantly, how do you design an onboarding system that scales rapidly without accidentally crushing the exact independent instincts and superpowers that made them such an attractive hire in the first place? That incredibly delicate tension between corporate scale and individual brilliance is exactly what we will deconstruct next time.
But before we leave, I want to pose one final, slightly provocative thought experiment for you to mull over. We have spent this entire deep dive establishing two core premises. First, that the absolute best talent is almost always passive, meaning they are fundamentally not looking for new opportunities. Second, we established that the ideal foundational hire shouldn't actually be focused primarily on closing revenue, but rather on pattern recognition, product development, and market fit. If both of those realities are true, are we fundamentally misunderstanding the very definition of sales in the modern economy?
That's a huge question.
If the elite performers are acting more like investigative consultants and product iteration specialists than smooth-talking transactional closers, think about how that shifts your perspective the next time you sit across the table from a candidate. Whether you are interviewing someone for sales, marketing, engineering, or product design, are you searching for a traditional, outdated skill set, or are you actually looking for an engineer of growth?
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.